I'm getting ready to hit the road again, but last night I spent some time editing a conversation that Lynn Davenport from Richardson, Texas, and I had, and it's been over a year that I've had it in waiting to be edited and put out. We were doing a whole series on open education resources because she and her colleagues have been really trying to educate the school choice movement and the Texas legislators about what that is in terms of open education resources is like playlist, personalized education that's going to be mediated by AI to feed children content and have them react to it in this gamified way. But it's not presented to people that way. So anyway, so we did a whole series. We haven't actually finished it. We did the first 3 series, and then I'll put the little clip in of Learn Capital before I start the conversation, because it really builds on Learn Capital, which was formerly over in Powder Mountain in Utah, outside of Salt Lake City, and they've relocated to Austin. They have their own like 3 or 4 building, like modest building, like but sort of posh campus in Austin to lobby for these educational technologies and therapeutic systems for, neurodiverse people and that sort of thing. And Evan Baer, Evan Evan Baer, Baehr, I believe, is one of the key executives with Learn Capital. And again, they're impact investors. They're going to be investing in these ed tech solutions, which will be then generating the signals for the ant-computer coordination. And he last year had attended an event. It was on his LinkedIn at the Vatican, at their Pontifical Social Sciences Institute. And so I'll show you the 3-minute clip that introduces you sort of to Learn Capital and their relocation in Austin. This was sort of their launch event, which was over a year ago now. And then we'll dive back into the conversation. So I've been feeling kind of guilty sitting on this for a while, but looking back at the date, we recorded it on April 23rd of last year. And that was right before I took my mom and her 80th birthday trip to the beach, and then came back and my whole life got exploded. And so it's been sort of a whirlwind ever since then. And I know I've done other content, but I just put that on the back burner. I didn't get back to it. But I do believe, going back last night and doing some of the editing and the sound levels and stuff like that, there's a purpose behind it. I feel like, God's hand is in this. I mean, when the timing, right? I was feeling bad that I had never gotten it back out, but the timing is actually perfect, and it totally complements what I've recently been putting out about Nicole Shanahan and RFK Jr. Because it involves the Vatican, and like it or not, the whole Kennedy mythos is inextricably woven into the Catholic Church and the institution that is the Catholic Church. And these days, that can't be considered without looking at the Catholic educational system and the Catholic health system, because these 2 big data mineable fields are both health and education. And we're going to see them launching this Humanity 2.0 in connection with Harvard, so the Vatican and Harvard. Humanity 2.0, it's all about wellness, guys. It's all about wellness. So it's actually, the timing is just right. And again, Shanahan, her JD degree, her law degree, is from Santa Clara University. And as I mentioned in the last video, Santa Clara and Fred Ferrer and Patricia Deneen and Catholic Relief Services. It's a Jesuit university. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is an alum, and they're very deeply embedded into this sort of tech-forward impact investing environment. And that's where she was sort of trained in automated AI law, which is going to be the outside-in robot, these cyber-physical socio-technical systems I keep talking about. So I'm going to put this out, and I just want to emphasize, Texas is on the forefront of leading this, right? I keep saying the wellness, the shock to set everything up, to set up the teaming, to set up the trauma, to set up the heroes, to set up the influencer society, that all came out of the lockdowns, right? But it wasn't going to be that forever. And so the long game, in my opinion, is managed wellness, right? And as I've said before, the health freedom community, I think it had to be created for this purpose, to run the impact markets moving forward, because again, it's going to be around chronic illness. So they need data all the time data, just like, the end of year standardized tests weren't enough for the schools because it was never about that. They wanted all the time gamified online learning so that the signals were perpetual. And it's going to be that in the education space and the health space. And, I think if you look back and you wonder, oh, why did the narrative arcs send everybody to Florida and Texas? Like, why were those the places that they sent people, right? The health freedom team, right? Team Health Freedom, that was fabricated. I mean, there are, not to say that people who had an interest in these various diverse alternative health practices didn't already exist, but they had it coalesced in this way, right? The gold bug people and the sovereignty people and the health people and the, naturopaths and the permaculture, like all of that had it coalesced yet. And so they needed the lockdown trauma to bring that together and then to direct it. And it got directed into Florida and it got directed into Texas. And those are both places that are very forward on Web3 blockchain, right? They're very forward on limited government free market choice. And they're also very big on gamified defense innovation and simulation technologies, right? I mean, and people just, if you don't know the game, you don't even know what you're in, right? And that's what I keep telling people. You got sent there, and there's a reason you got sent there, because the health freedom wellness game is game B, and it's inextricably linked to this Humanity 2.0. And so they're gonna create an environment and manufactured communities to tell you who you are and put you in a box and then keep you there, unless you're you have enough of your own self-identity to not need the groupthink, whatever, even if it's alternative groupthink, and step back out. So as you listen to this, I just want to sort of reinforce my door into all of this was education, was seeing children being harmed by their educational institutions, and all the homeschoolers out there, this idea of like, oh, you got to pull your kids out of those government schools. Well, that's the goal. The goal is to get them out of the government schools and then to get you with a digital wallet interacting with spatial computing in your home, right? Because they really want the data on everybody in your home. So just hold it, you school choice people and you unschooling and homeschooling people, because you're part of the game too, right? And if you don't acknowledge your position in it, you're just going to fall forward and you're going to be buffeted around the game board, because you'll think that you're superior, but actually you're just another piece of the puzzle that they're moving around. So I feel really strongly about this. And again, my life, I'm I'm in this weird hotel room in Franklin, Tennessee, because driving through Nashville in a U-Haul is crazy. The traffic in Nashville is insane. I mean, I'm from Philly, like I'm pretty good with traffic, but just the density of traffic in Nashville is so different. And to me, it's so clear that like the South is being built up for this sort of tech forward biotech space. And of course, Nashville's with Vanderbilt and also a center for biotech innovation. And so I went way around the Beltway, which is a really far Beltway, and I ended up in Franklin. And you can see there's like some sort of weird artwork in my hotel room last night. And I was just curious because like I know there's something about Franklin. So Hashed Health is one of the big blockchain health systems, but they're in downtown. So it wasn't Hashed Health. And then I remembered Rooster Cheek Software. So like Rust ICI, Rooster Cheek Software, which is eventually spun off Problem Solutions. They were one of the leaders in developing SCORM, the Shareable Content Object Reference Module. So here we are in the synchronous thing is that I'm editing this year-old piece on open education resources that is now more relevant than ever in this Catholic context of RFK Jr.'s campaign in the Vatican and the impact investing. And it's all going to run, all of OER runs on, well, it was SCORM, Shareable Content Object Reference Module, and now it's XAPI technology. And again, that's all defense. That's all defense soldier training in gamified simulation areas, because that's what the metaverse is done. We use all of this defense budget to build the metaverse, right? And so I'm doing this editing, and I'm realizing that Rooster Teeth software is like on Gothic Circle, Gothic, of course, which is a 5-minute drive from this cheap hotel that I'm in, which is interesting. No, actually, it's an 8-minute drive. It was an 8-minute drive one direction, and then I remembered, I was like, I'm pretty sure that Ryan Christian guy is from Tennessee. Like, was he in Nashville? And yes, so that there's a mailing address. If you go to the Last American Vagabond and you look at their contact information and their mailing address, it's a 5-minute drive from this hotel that I'm in, and it's actually a UPS store. So I thought that was kind of funny. I don't know if he actually lives in the vicinity and he just uses the UPS store post box for their mailing address for Last American Vagabond or what. But I thought that was kind of funny that this is where I landed. So, but again, just wanting to emphasize, this is about the next generation that's being trained up to be these interdimensional puzzle solvers with digital wallets. And it's going to be sold to you as freedom and choice. And have we agreed to this? And with the side of, self-assembling nanoparticles and frequency distribution, right? Like, have we agreed? Do we understand what the consequences are? I would assert that we have not agreed. We do not have a generally understood agreement that this is what civilization is doing, that we're doing the noosphere thing. And again, with the Catholic Church, the noosphere thing. And we haven't decided. And this impacts children very directly. It impacts people who rely on government assistance, and it impacts children. And I've always been here for that. Like, and in fact, it breaks my heart to know that, like, now I'm on this different trajectory, but I did it for the right reasons. These were not selfish reasons. These were reasons because I think if we style ourselves a democracy, whatever that is that a super organism? But if we have these myths about who we are, then we need to be informed and educated, and we need to take responsibility for knowing enough to have an informed understanding and doing that work. And so I would say, if you're still watching, online influencers out there, and there are people who are talking about their kids or using kids as sort of a narrative frame for their discussions, and I know RFK Jr. is always talking about our kids, where are they on turning kids into asset-backed securities using Web3 technologies and big data and machine learning? Where are they? Is that how they see the purpose of children, is to be investable commodities in human capital and some sort of this, Esalen human capital and human potential movement project, interdimensional human potential movement project? Because I just call bullshit on all of that. Like, I think so many people on there, I think they intentionally look aside because they don't want to know, because then once you actually have to take a position, and once you take a position, your life changes, right? You fall out of the normal boxes, the normal modes of conversation, and then you have to build something new. And so anyway, I'm in the process of building something new. I really enjoyed this conversation with Lynn. I think we always have really good conversations. And again, if you imagined us in maybe 2017, 2018, when we first found each other online, you would have imagined we were in different boxes, right? Like, the liberal Northeasterner, or the, conservative Texan or whatever. But like, once you kind of explode those boxes, and that's not to say that we don't still have, our core values, but there's so much commonality in those values. And then once you understand the polarization and teaming, you can just like throw that away. And I think you can really tell that sort of the genuine affection that we have for each other, and like the good way of like building on each other's knowledge. And that's, I really value that. So thank you, Lynn. And I'm sorry that it's taken a year for me to get this out. But again, there's a reason that this happened. And anyway, I appreciate you. Check out this short video from Learn Capital. Understand that this is the framework. And then Evan Bears, who's an executive with Learn Capital, again, in impact investing in educational technology and human capital in Texas, right where they sent everybody, the most place with the biggest supercomputers and the most data mining of children in the country, right? Sent everybody there. Go take your kids there and homeschool, right, on the blockchain. And then sort of we segue in. And there's sort of a weird beginning thing with this weird guy who's like a crypto trader in Austin that relates, so that sort of leads with that. But hopefully, once I get situated, I still have more of a slide deck to do when we were going to talk more about the military background of XAPI technology and OER. And I'm confident that I will get to that sooner than 2025. So anyway, let's see if I can keep that promise. So.
What I find very exemplary is the event taking place today, where different portfolio companies are brought together and where they are also invited to share their questions or the challenges that they're facing and asking for help.
Definitely gives a feeling of camaraderie with other great companies that are doing amazing things for humanity.
Welcome everyone to the Learn Flourish conference. We have chosen to build out a campus, a headquarters here in Austin, Texas, to advance this mission of human flourishing.
We've been at this now for 13 years. We're focused on category-defining companies and human capital development.
There's a lot that we do at Learn, and there's a lot that all of you do. So there's a huge tent, effectively, of areas of passion that individuals here possess.
Founder and CEO of Empath, Chairman and CEO of Ascent Funding.
Senior Fellow with the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity.
And Kevin from Pathrise, Jin from Polygens.
Two of the most accomplished people in our portfolio.
Co-founder and CEO of Merlin Mind.
We are the world's largest online learning platform.
300 million users a month.
From 2021 to 2022, we've been able to about 2.8x. We're getting a little bit too much interest.
We pioneered a revolutionary product called an outcomes-based loan.
We are independently rated, all green on ed reports for our science program, perfect score for our DesMos Rath curriculum.
So what ESA does, it helps level that playing field for low-income Black kids.
This has a higher effectiveness for severe autism. And this is not after 10 years of ABA therapy. This is after a month.
All of human knowledge should be accessible at your fingertips at any time, instantly, serving the process of teaching and learning.
What we've developed is a telepathic system. So it's a system you can wear on your head and you can control technology with your mind.
It's an enormous privilege to be able to work with such a squad of individuals as we go and attempt to ourselves help entrepreneurs who are founding the next generation of learning companies.
Okay, hi, welcome everybody. This is Open Education Resources of Texas, round 4. I'm here with Lynn in Dallas. You want to say hi, Lynn?
Hi, everyone.
And I know you guys just are excited for this whole new installment. I feel like we should have a whole season of episodes, Lynn.
Right. Yeah.
So the last session that we did, was number 3, and we spent the time really talking about honing in on Learn Capital, which has this cozy relationship with Amplify, and they just set up shop in Austin. And we talked a little bit about how they came from Powder Mountain outside of Salt Lake City. And like in this whole mix is Tom Vander Ark and some other interesting, Eric Hanashek, people who are, a very deep stable of advisors. And so we were looking at their launch video for their new campus in Austin, which happened, when did it launch? Was it this spring or was it last fall?
So it would have been probably in the spring because it was under construction when we ran into him last fall.
Okay. All right.
So I'm assuming it was just in the last few months.
Okay. All right. So, and the gentleman, his name is Evan Baer, Baehr.
Yes, they spelled it wrong in the photos that you'll show later.
Oh, okay. Maybe I probably misspelled his name.
No, you spelled it right. I noticed on his name placard that they spelled it wrong.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so you happened to informally bump into him, but clearly you've been up in Austin a lot testifying against various bills, including this one for open education resources.
Right.
And it seems like they're sort of backdoor connected to that.
They are. And he also testified in favor of a bill for vouchers that would go to special needs kids. So I thought that was interesting. Most people wouldn't know who he was. He didn't say, I'm Evan Baer from Learn Capital. I'm investing in this other vendor bill. He gets up there and pleads for money to follow the child, which, of course, will be tied to their digital wallets eventually.
Right. And one of the other things you mentioned last time was that at least on one of the bills, there was a strong presence from the Catholic contingent.
Yes, and the Catholic schools are circling the Capitol. A lot of the bills that are money following the child school choice voucher bills and education savings accounts, they have the backing of the Catholic Church, and you have all these bishops showing up at the Capitol in support of having the money.
The money, yeah, they'd like the money, please. Well, so, and it's quite fascinating because on Mr. Baer's LinkedIn profile last fall, he had like a couple shots of him being at this, visiting the Vatican to sell them on the new educational investment opportunities, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so the Vatican has been on my radar, at least for the past 5 years, because I was tracking their impact conferences that started in 2014, and there was one in 2014, 2016, and 2018. And then during the lockdowns, I think, or maybe just after, there was a health one called Unite to Prevent. So the Vatican has definitely positioned itself around impact finance. And again, across the health space, across the education space, across all these other things, and globally. So he was there for this event called Humanity 2.0 in the fall. And so I decided, originally this set of slides was going to focus on mostly the military aspect of this, because the person who was backing, is it House Bill 1605? It's a House bill.
Yeah, there's a sister bill that's Senate Bill 2565, but the House bill is the one that you and I have featured because of the House chair of the Public Education Committee. We had that long dialogue, extensive dialogue that went on, and lots of back and forth with the legislators. But the other bill is just as, it's equally as problematic.
Yeah. And he comes from Killeen, correct? And
yes.
And that's the site of
Killeen. And his wife is an administrator, chief learning officer of Killeen ISD. So normally you would think that an administrator would be against this. I even emailed her the other day. She has not replied. But I said, hey, most public school teachers are against privatization. And this is the ultimate privatization tool is technology. But of course, you and I know that it's way more than that. Much deeper than that comes from the military and the Department of Defense. And this is much bigger than privatization and shifting the money, from public dollars into private hands.
Yeah. And so a lot of this learning technology came out of military training for soldiers, and has for some time, and it's linked to simulation technology and video gaming. So the fact that they're in Killeen, which is the home of it used to be Fort Hood. I don't know, it's changing its name. I don't know if the name has changed yet. But a very significant military base in the state of Texas and in the country. So I think an important contextual piece is the military, both that and the fact that Austin, which I think has this really branding as sort of a liberal music city, arts and culture, has for a long time through the university and these various defense contractor interests, like a lot of defense stuff going on, right? Mm-hmm. So, and defense innovation, it's one of these defense innovation unit offices to bring in small companies into the new kind of warfare, which in many respects is happening in these weird digital spaces, right? It's like a war on consciousness kind of. So yeah, so today we're going to talk about, we're going to start off with just a brief kerfluffle that happened last night to me, but I think it's useful because there is some context with Austin, and then we're going to move on to visiting some information about Evan's trip to the Vatican and who he might have seen while he was there, and then we'll segue into the military stuff. So that's the three parts. So this is the first prelude, and I will just say, so in this idea of sort of fifth generation warfare or cognitive domain management, which imagine like this kind of digital space is what we're pushing kids into, right? With these technologies, immersive reality, but it's sort of a Wild West, right? And we understand for a long time there are issues around cyberbullying, right? People misrepresenting them online with like what their actual interests are, whether they're children or whether they're adults. And I think we're we're seeing that more and more often, that these digital spaces, not that I'm demanding a safe space per se, but if you're going to create a digital classroom for children and you don't actually have ways of monitoring what's going on in these spaces, I think there's a lot of concerns, because to me, what it seems like the focus is focused on consciousness, to actually grab into the psyche and the identity of the users of these technologies. And we're all going to be lifelong learners, so it could be adults, but definitely the children, and even the young children that they're pulling into this to use these technologies to shape how they see themselves in the world.
Well, and I would say that even if that wasn't the case, what we're seeing is an increase in access from teachers who are preying upon students, so inappropriate relationships, because the parent's no longer the firewall. It's easy to access the students in the middle of the night. We're seeing an uptick in that. And the other thing is, anytime they talk about innovation, it tends to be experimentation. And then when it fails, they just move on to the next experiment. But that's not just the issue. It's what you're talking about is a far greater issue with this, and it's purposeful, and it is an access point into the psyche and you hear a lot about mental health. Well, these technologies are increasing all of those mental health issues. So go ahead.
Well, and I was even thinking about like the stimuli, the school in a video game, where they're asking students to create an avatar and then inhabit that avatar. But often in gaming environments, you might make a character that doesn't exactly represent you as you are. Maybe it's aspirational. Maybe you try on a different identity, like when you're in a gaming space. And so I think that there is this tendency, and some might frame it as liberating, right? That you could be anybody on any day. You could be this person this week and this other person next week. But I don't think that we actually have like research to show that that's safe for people who are forming their identities. I have a lot of concerns about it, and you don't really hear a lot of people talking about it.
That's a good point, because then if you can be whoever you want to be, then you're not really developing as a person during those years, those formative years. You're not really able to do it in an authentic way if you have this virtual self, this avatar self. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then even times, encountering maybe conflict online, there's, and I've done it myself, like block people or remove yourself, like when things are difficult, but it's a different kind of engagement when you're in these spaces, right? And it's not realistic to expect that you can just turn somebody off or disappear or absent. Like what habits are we bringing into the space for again, children who should have an opportunity to try things out, to make mistakes, to learn from them, to be redeemed, to forgive, to be forgiven. All of these are
to be able to read social cues, I think, is a big one too, that you're missing out on in the tone. Tone is a big one of what you say online and what you would say in person. Those can be perceived very differently or misread.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so like with all of that sort of in the background, I've had a couple of like bump-ins with sort of controversial things the past week. And yesterday it involved someone that at least I knew online, whatever that means, right? Who had to my face been very friendly, but behind the scenes indicated that I was she was concerned that dark forces were channeling me to manifest the shenanigans or something like that. And it was in response to a video that this gentleman made. His name is Dennis Humble. And as it turns out, when I looked into Mr. Humble, because he used a very distinctive profile picture in this Telegram chat where his video was made and the responding comment was made. And it turns out, I kind of asked for help from the crowd because the esoterics isn't really my bag, but it looked like a sigil. It looked like one of these sort of magical charm things. And it turns out it was like the sigil, I guess. It was the lesser seal of the Solomon seal, or the secret seal of Solomon, or something like that. And it literally was from like this magic book from the 17th century, like where people imagine that they're calling up demons, right? And so this is how he's presenting himself online through this profile pic, not only in this Telegram chat, but across his Twitter channel and his YouTube channel and other things. And so in this person he was responding to a video that was posted about my critique of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s candidacy. And at the beginning, he spoke to the fact that I was very detailed and I was a very good researcher. But he found that people who do a lot of detailed work generally are bad decision makers. And my problem was that I was looking too much at the negatives and not enough at the opportunities, right? So that was the framing. And then sort of pivoted into essentially a very bleak view of humanity, that essentially most humans were cancers on the earth and couldn't make decisions for themselves, didn't want to make decisions for themselves, and really only sovereign entrepreneurs like himself would be navigating, and the rest of the people, like, he could sort of care less for. And it was sad because I think if he reflected, in many ways, I think he's inhabiting a character. Like, I think he's wearing a cast. He's in Austin, right? So there's a connection to this talk because literally he's driving around. I don't know if he's in Austin, but his company is in Austin, and he has a hat with a patch. It was a Texas patch, Lynn. It's the Texas flag. Oh. That was the flag. That was the patch.
Yeah.
So he's identifying his identity as this character in Texas, and it turns out that he's actually trading futures. Like, he's an options trader in Bitcoin currency, among other things. Okay, so when I've very clearly laid out my concerns about Web3 and tokenization and the turning of human capital, namely children or other vulnerable populations, into tokenized assets for this speculative ventures, which essentially are legalized gambling, which in and of itself, I'm convinced, has its own pathology. People who are driven to do this kind of gambling. He has his own firm, and he was previously with another trading firm in Austin. Not one of the biggest. This is certainly not a BlackRock or Vanguard or something like that. But it was very troubling to me to see this outlook, that this was his worldview, because in 5 years, the tokens he's trading are no longer going to be Bitcoin, but the options on all of these other things, whether human capital or natural capital. And, I said in several points in my discussion, like, my friend Lynn is going and with her colleagues to Austin to petition against these technologies that are going to turn children into tokenized assets. Like, we're here, the viewpoint you're inhabiting is that most everyone in the world is a write-off, and essentially, it was a very dehumanizing perspective. And again, he put himself above the majority of people because of his sovereignty, which is, again, one of these words you hear a lot about, like, in this certain kind of culture. But I said, we're doing it for children, right? We're doing it for the kids in Houston whose school districts are being taken away so they can be replaced by digital programs and AI. We're not giving up. The sad thing was that this individual who was saying that the respondent who liked the video, this is someone who kind of knew me online, said, oh, I'm worried about me channeling dark forces and manifesting this reality because I'm doing the research. Whereas the options trader based in Austin, who has very little, the character he was playing seemed to have very little disregard for humanity, right? Other than an opportunity for him to make a profit. And so,
and it seems to be a recurring pathological trait that these investors have. And also, I mean, as you know, we have the education agency head who has been behind a number of bills pushing the human capital markets and the social impact bond bills that directly tie the children to this technology that tracks them, and then it's gambling on their outcomes.
Yeah,
you're exactly right. So
and they need the real-time data.
Conjecture.
And they want the psychometrics. They want not just what you know, but what these soft skills are. And that is the depth at which, once you get the wearables in, right? Once it comes out of the screen and you're watching the children with the AI cameras and the wearables and the augmented reality glasses and sensor-based manipulatives or whatever, you're creating these digital twins, not because it's better for children, but it's a way to objectify children.
Well, it's better because when I study the behavior of the commissioner and what he says versus what he does, that is exactly where they're leading, because it is easier. It's much easier to control the situation and see them on the dashboard if you have all of those trackable data points and those outcomes, because there's a big push for the outcomes-based education. But now he may not overtly say we're going to move them into augmented and virtual reality, but all of the technologies he's pushing, as well as, and I think this is very important to name names, and you pointed out the psychometrics. There's a lot of ambiguous talk about those soft skills, but Mike Morath, the commissioner, has talked specifically about those soft skills. And I even sent you that quote from the Dallas Morning News article from 2014 when he was trying to take over the board. So this is not a stretch to connect these dots, that not only with the social impact bonds, trading on the kids' futures, but also adding in that component of the soft skills, the behavioral skills, the non-cognitive stuff that is the psychometrics. But he's not going to call it that. He's going to say, oh, these are what you have to do to show up to win, or to,
we want to bridge the opportunity gap. We need those kids.
And social emotional learning, he denounces it because the moms have come after him and exposed him. We have him on audio, that audio of Alice Linehan has, of him saying that we can test these non-cognitive skills and these traits, grit, perseverance, showing up, that kind of thing. So that it's not about the benefit, it's not for the benefit of the kid, but that's the pitch. Of course, I coach job seekers. Yes, soft skills matter. If you don't know how to interact with people, then you're not going to be as marketable for a job, right? But we're talking about marketing. This is marketable skills for this skills future that they're setting up through our education system and through these technology vendors partnering with the districts and then the investors behind the scenes. But it's obviously so much more. And we've talked about weather futures on our talks before. We've talked about other futures, energy futures. The children are no different than these weather outcomes, and these, or even just other markets that people gamble on. No different. The housing, and some of the same people who were there for the 2008 crash are the same people who are behind the scenes in Texas, like Todd Williams and the Commit Partnership. They are the ones writing the bills that tie all of these pieces to lead us to this future. So it is not a stretch, and I'm glad that you can see it, and you have so many different gifts than I do, and being able to put those two together to help people to see, this is imminent. This is right here.
It feels like it's ramping up, but it's kind of like a few people can see how all the pieces come together. And I just want to emphasize, as much as this is about gambling and making money, especially in the soft skills and the digital twinning and this ubiquitous, computing. And I've been talking about with Cliff this pervasive day, this Jeremy Pitt, this idea of the world watching us, living inside a panopticon. This decentralized system that is attempting to mine humanity, whether it wants to be human or simply to coordinate us as some computational system, it wants us to perform our humanity for it. And so all of the social emotional learning, all of this idea about brain engineering, mindfulness, mind control, they literally want to mirror the machine mental neural nets off of people. They want to have us portray every aspect of humanity, the most glorious and the most base, into this thing. And this is what they're pulling the children into. This is child labor. This is literally child labor, unpaid, unregulated child labor for this machine.
It literally is. And I've always wondered if there was an angle to be able to come at this or approach this from a legal perspective as a child labor violation. But I've never, and Alice Linehan and I talked about that years ago when she found these old documents about child labor and how that came about.
Oh, interesting.
There's
and they're going to be pivoting, because it'll be the subtle labor of performing for the machine, and then there'll be a whole other component, and we've talked about that before with Cristo Rey, of work-based learning, so on the name of getting the soft skills data in there. So I just want to pivot back a little bit to Mr. Humble, and I think he was a little bit off-put by the fact, because in his clip, he seemed to invite feedback, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing it? Like, what do you think? And he kind of opened it up. And the fact that he opened his clip with talking about me, although he never actually, besides sort of dismissing that I must be lost in the weeds and I couldn't see these great opportunities, for a Web3, he did open the door. And so I went ahead, and there's 2 videos that are live streams that people can watch if they want a little bit more detail. But I wanted to start with this because, again, it's situated in Austin. I'm deconstructing the video, and I'm explaining that we're standing in the gap for the children, right? But still, his focus is his personal well-being, his business opportunities, his personal profit. So when people are occupied in this headspace, in this worldview, it's very hard for them to see that these betting pools that they're involved with are going to involve children, because they want to keep their distance from it. I think they want to just keep that objectification. So someone passed this along, not to think that like I'm actually stalking this guy, but people are concerned about me, right? So they're like, hey, did you see this? And so, I wanted to incorporate this in case, for goodness sakes, at some point it matters. But you'll see here his sigil here, which is this secret seal of Solomon, and he was like, oh, you didn't know that. And I'm like, no, because the esoterics isn't my leading skill. But, I knew enough to ask my community, because there are a lot of people who know better than I do. So he's definitely branding himself in this way across platforms. And it says equities trader and crypto enthusiast, right? So again, 12 subscribers, only 1 video. Okay. So this video is from 10 years ago. It's about changing a headlight on a Dodge Ram. Okay, so, and evidently, it was I guess a lot of people wanted to figure out about changing that headlight, because it got 26,000 views, which is like pretty good, right? You've got 1 video, it's got all these views. But I guess people out there really need to know, they'd rather not go to the mechanic, they'd rather do it themselves. So, good on Dennis for providing that resource. But what the person who forwarded this noticed was that when they opened the clip and looked to see what the newest comment was, and again, this video is 10 years old. The other most recent comment was from months ago. This person called JFK Beta, and this was 14 hours ago. So this would have been maybe the morning after I did my live stream last night about, it would have been early morning, I guess, today. But kind of not too long after I, explained why this video I thought was a problem. And so this JFK Beta person leaves a comment on this Dodge truck video. We can always use more light. Summer 2023 will be interesting. Sunglasses, and then like arm bend, whatever, bicep thing. All right. Which is an odd statement to make, right? It's an odd statement to make. So then this person who was finding this and thought it was quite odd, went to the person's page, JFK Beta, and this is the page. They don't have a lot of subscribers on YouTube, but they have a lot of followers on Instagram, and it seems to be somebody who's very much into like fitness and working out and maybe some technology stuff. It has this Garfield face at the top and these videos. And what my friend was sort of shocked to see was that there was a clip from 4 days ago. So I didn't even know about any of this stuff nonsense with the woman calling me channeling dark energy and the, sigil wielding crypto trader. Like, I did not even know that guy existed 4 days ago. And yet 4 days ago, the person who's commenting on the video has this video called What is Web 3.0? Okay, and it has 12 views, so not a lot of views. But I just thought I would play this because the person who pointed this out to me was quite shocked that this was a clip of Jason and I talking about Andreessen Horowitz and Web3.
So weird.
So I just want to walk back through. So here we have Mr. Humble, who is commenting on my critique of RFK Jr., only not in any substantive way, just saying that I'm missing the opportunities. He has a minor channel. He only has 1 video from 10 years ago. On that video, within the last 24 hours, this person comments about we could always use more light. Summer of 2023 will be interesting. Okay. And then, so this is his channel. So I'm just going to play this because this feels part of what I talked about in my presentation was the fact that There is such a thing as financial astrology, this idea of cycles, and Edward Dewey, the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. And in these spaces, there's also this esoteric aspect in Austin specifically. So when I was exposing some of the crypto skeptics, and I was talking about Ian Grigg and this guy, Stephen Deal, who were hosting this Crypto Skeptic Conference, they were being interviewed at a Materium event. Now, Materium is Vinay Gupta. And I don't know if you remember, but when we went to the Mormon Transhumanist Conference on blockchain in Provo, he was a remote presenter. And he was talking about digital like objects, like essentially what he is building in Vinay Gupta. Materium is his company. It's called the Internet of Agreements. So it's all of the contracting that will go back and forth, which is something that Ian Grigg is very focused on, is the legal aspect of these smart contracts. Not all smart contracts are necessarily legally binding. So that's what Ian Grigg had been working on. So when I did this research, it turns out that Vinay Gupta was close affiliates with this guy, Jason Louv. I don't know if you pronounce it that way, L-O-U-V. And Jason Louv is based in Austin. And Jason Louv is a Enochian chaos magician, right? And so we've got this overlap with Web3 and esoterics and financial systems trading. And to me, it's all very concerning. So then when you stumble across, and this is only like 30 seconds, but I'm going to play it because I feel like it's important that someone see this. Like the idea of when I go and I set an intention with my dandelions or my acorns or things, it's an intention for a healing, like a healing of the traumas that are in the space that are leading us to be disconnected from each other and the divine and nature and all of those things, right? It's a good intention. When I watch this, which generally it seems like this individual is into body work, a lot of exercise, it doesn't feel good, okay? And I don't know why you would do a mashup only of 30 seconds of Jason and I in this way. So I'm just going to play it for you and see how it goes. Like that's something that people need to start to get a handle on, is what does Web3 mean? I mean, most of the stuff that we're talking about lately is really Web3 centric. This idea that the sensor network, the internet, has come out of the screen, out of your phone, out of your wearable, and it's actually connected to physical built environment in the land, and that becomes the game board. So the fact that Andreessen Horowitz is the partner is okay. So right, that's a bit odd. I just wanted someone else to see that, because that doesn't make me feel comfortable, right? Now, when I did my deconstruction of Mr. Humble, I was trying to be generous, right? Because I don't think actually it probably feels good to be in the headspace that he's in. And so I was trying to sort of have some empathy for his perspective. But to take our material, this is not meant to be informational. This is imprinting information on top of what we've already created. This isn't a response. This is, and for people who may be just listening, there were things like owls, walking dolphins with human legs, surrealism, skeletons, people with guns, dogs with guns. It was not a
trash can,
like a walking trash can. And this was all intermixed with this person. I'm assuming it's his channel doing, without his shirtless, doing exercise routines in front of, that was all mixed in. So it doesn't feel good. So I just want to say, like, when we're, and this is his Instagram here. So JFK Beta, he has 8,500 followers. So I don't know, that seems like a good amount on there, but he seems to be maybe a bodybuilder or something. So it's a little creepy. Like, again, the intersection of Humble with this guy, with these overlaid scenes, I don't know what the purpose is. It does seem like there is some intention behind it that is not good. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff breaking loose in Austin right now that, like, we need to be paying attention on, and we need to trust our gut, because even this whole thing that came to my attention was someone who has a certain intuition about things, and they located the initial comment and clip for me because they, value the work that we were doing and saw something that just didn't seem right and then followed their gut with it. And so I'm sharing this I just want it documented because I feel like it's important. And I feel like, again, these people who are options traders and who identify with magical symbols and crypto, they're not disconnected what is happening legislatively in your state. And again, the story that's being told here is around entrepreneurs, free market, sovereignty, right? Most of those people, they suck, but I'm pretty good, so I'm looking for my opportunity, right? And I feel like there's a certain ethos that has a weird synergy in Texas that's like coming in, and it's not something that the moms stand for, right? Like the moms are showing up saying like no, but the chambers of commerce. I know, Lynn.
I don't have anything to say. I'm speechless.
I know, it's a little strange. Yeah, in case something happens to me, I just want it out there. Odd. I mean, I'm not really, but yeah, no, I put the dandelions out there, guys. That's my energy. I'm definitely vibing with like like dandelions and seashells and stuff. So now we can pivot to the Vatican. Learn Capital visits the Vatican. All right, so the event that he was part of, this is Evan Bayer. He was, representing Learn Capital in Austin. And this event at the Vatican was last fall, November 3rd and 4th of 2022. And it was part of something called Humanity 2.0. And it was the Agenda for Human Flourishing Forum at the Pontifical Academy of Sciences of the Holy See. So is there a word there that jumps out at you, Lynn, in that first thing? The F word?
Flourishing, yes, because as if we're not flourishing until we ascend to this next version of ourselves, Humanity 2.0. Yeah, very strange.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of flourishing lately. I think flourishing was like threaded through the video of Learn Capital. Like maybe they were like, okay, like from now on, flourishing, it's the word. Like at least every, once an hour, fit that in somewhere, the flourishing part. So
I think fluoride.
Well, what's weird, I have this whole presentation that I haven't done yet, but I'm still like sitting on it, which is related to this, the OA TV show, which is very strange TV show about these near-death experiences. But there's this crazy, it's about like interdimensional travel and these different things. But this guy is seeking to map the interdimensionality, and he actually, I don't know, he kind of kills people and then floats them in this pool, and then all these things grow out of their ears. It was like the seed of their soul, and it turns into like lotus flowers on the water, and that each petal of the flower is a different reality. And so when I looked up flourish, it was talking about flower, like the flowers, like not like with a bread, like flowers like in a garden. And I was just thinking about this image of this crazy thing of this, they called it like the garden of Borges, the garden of forking paths, and that you could eat a petal and then go into that dimension or something like that. But the flower structures were literally growing out of the ears, like little sprouts out of these dead bodies. Like it was very grotesque, right? But I keep thinking flourishing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like Human 2.0, are they trying to like tap into our soul, like the seed, the kernel of us, which is our flower, to use it for some other purpose? Anyway, like, because I was trying to figure out what's the deal with flourishing, and you've got fluoride and I have creepy flowers. But at this event, so it says that they're doing it with the CEOs, ESG and sustainability leaders, philanthropists, and top academic minds. And they're working on the flourishing. It involves, surprise, surprise, technology, media, and thought leadership with public, private, and faith-based organizations. And so I keep saying, I'm like, church people, pay attention to your people, right? Like if that is your space, you've got to take this stuff and go to your minister, your rabbi, your imam, whatever, and say, listen, this is coming. Where are we in relation to this? Because this doesn't feel like...
Well, and they're going to the churches. Mary and I did that. Mary Lowe and I did that. We attended that event with Margaret Spelling sitting on the stage with Todd Williams, and Margaret's on the board of Amplify, and she was George Bush's education secretary, and this was in a church. This was an Episcopal church, a very prominent church in an affluent neighborhood in Dallas, and they're going to the churches with their model. So if the churches aren't brought up to speed, they're not going to recognize this. They will buy it and they'll eat it up, hook, line, and sinker, because now, we're, instead of being isolated where people come to church and we live in a bubble, now you're supposed to be the church and you're supposed to be out in the community. The church is now kind of branching out into communities and evangelizing in that way, which, of course I have no issue. Yeah, of course we have to take care of people, and that we are supposed to be the hands and feet of Christ as Christians. But
this is an investment market, right? This is ESG,
a very different thing,
right? This is different. Yeah, that's not charity.
No,
it's an opportunity. It's Mr. Humble's opportunity. Yeah.
They're coming to the churches. So the churches have to be ready for this and push back on it and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to track humans and give our impact statements and show our measurable outcomes and metrics as a church. And I think you've said it best, like Jesus would not put people on blockchain.
No, not at all. Jesus would not instill Internet of Things sensors and AI cameras in the preschool. Wouldn't happen, right? And so they're going to try to tell people. And I think, unfortunately, if once you break the public systems, right, and then people lose confidence, and I'm not saying that they're not losing confidence for authentic reasons, right? Sure. Whether it's health policies or curricular policies or monetary the feelings that when people are dissatisfied are many times reasonable. But this idea that then people can retreat with their voucher to a church and that or the synagogue or, the mosque, and that those people will, we know how to take care of our people, right? We know better than the government what our children need, right? We can give them the curriculum we think they should have. We can use their volunteer skills to do our mission work. Right. We can, and look, now we can use the government money to do all of that, right? Only there's going to be this small hitch. So in many respects, I can see how there would be many attractive elements to the churches, both from the cash flow, from this idea of shaping young people to the people they want them to be, which again, I'm not necessarily saying is terrible, but if we're all living in walled gardens, how do we ever know one another? How do are we just giving up on the idea of human diversity and having diverse societies that everyone just retreats into their safe space? Within that, I mean, I don't know how that happens unless they're like, okay, all right, kids, go on, put on your virtual reality headset.
Virtual reality is very diverse out there in the headset. I mean, I don't know.
But see, can you see? I can just see it exactly how it's going to work out. And people will think, thank God they're giving us our kids back. And we get money for it, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense until you read the fine print. And I've read every single bill, and they all have those hitches, those strings, or those the hoops that you have to jump through.
Right. And so they had this event at the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and it says that it is the ideal location to make this appeal to our better angels and encourage a leap of faith. So, I mean, the framing is quite fantastic, that we're supposed to have a leap of faith into humanity 2.0. We're supposed to leave our humanity at the door and jump into a belief of faith into their omega point, I guess.
Well, and you remember God decentralized. We learned about that when we were at the Mormon Transhumanism Conference. And so there was a lot of talk about things that sounded a lot like what this is saying. It's the same idea. The humanity 2.0, the next level human, the elevate. We're supposed to elevate to another level.
Yeah. And it is important because I often talk about Teilhard de Chardin, and who was the Jesuit geologist and part of the Peking man discovery. And, he had this idea, he and Vladimir Vernadsky, about this noosphere, right? That human evolution would evolve into being this global thought form, and that we would have, that's essentially the hive mind, right? And that I think in many respects, the internet is the infrastructure for that, now moving to Web3. And so, he was a Jesuit. Now, he was read out of the Catholic Church because what he was doing was wedding evolution with the church. Like he was finding a way to say, like, we were evolving towards Christogenesis is what this omega point idea was, the Christogenesis. Now, and again, I will just take this opportunity to point out that the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, I think, where Adam Newman's wife got her yoga certification, and they took their name after Teilhard de Chardin. Like a number of years ago, I think maybe it was 2015, RFK Jr. actually did like a keynote address for at their gala. I think it was actually in New York, not in Rhinebeck. But like this omega point stuff, it's threaded throughout this if you actually have your eyes to look. So now you've got a Jesuit Pope, and so it's coming back online. They're like, well, maybe old Mr. Old Teilhard de Chardin didn't have such a bad idea. Maybe we can make this work, because what they're bringing together is the physical sciences and the social sciences and faith. Like they're going to this convergence, consilience is what they're after. And so I can totally see this Humanity 2.0 is essentially an extension of the omega point, or the world brain.
Well, it is omega point because it's the last letter of the Greek alphabet, that it's the end. And God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I don't know if that's because that's supposed to be the ultimate ascendance to, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what that means. I know. Yeah. Or the end of humanity and then the beginning of this next thing. Yeah. Thing. I don't know. Something to think about.
Christogenesis. Yeah. And so among the delegates, so Cardinal Peter Turkson, I recognized his name. I think he's actually I think he may be Nigerian, and he was part of the social impact conferences with Ronald Cohen. So, in my blog, these are actually from 2018 and 2019. I did a number of blog posts about the Vatican impact conferences. One was for Ronald Cohen, who was kind of the father of venture capital and social impact finance, based in London, but with close ties to Israel, close with Michael Bloomberg, who brought it over here, this idea of these outcomes-based government contracts. And that's the public-private partnership, right? And it took me until really the last year and a half to understand that the profit motive and the control motive of having someone hooked up to a leaderboard with a digital identity and making money off of it wasn't the end game. That the end game really is steering towards this omega point, right? Performing humanity for the machine until we merge with the machine as one, right? As this unity point. And then I did another more in-depth article called The Doctrine of Discovery Redux, the Vatican's Plans for Impact Investing, and really sort of laid out, these three conferences were happening with the support of the Notre Dame Business School, Mendoza Business School, and set as part of this, the light of Evangelii Gaudium. So that's this idea of charity for the poor. And so a lot of this has ramped up since the last global economic crash, because they wrecked the economy and created lots of instability and poverty. And then now they're moving into transitioning to say, oh, the next phase, we're going to care about well-being, right? But the hitch is this pervasive day. We'll care about your well-being, but we'll put the elderly in a house that is a robot. We'll put the children on a playground that is a robot. We'll put the teen drivers in a car that is a robot. Everything is in the robot, so that the robot's in charge and the robot's learning from you.
Yeah, and it'll be on their terms. And I think it's interesting. So with Ronnie Cohen being the father of venture capital, he was in that documentary Invisible Hand of Markets, and saying we now have proof of concept. Right. And then you have those who are questioning the model saying, would that be what they call it, the Wall Streetification of social services? And is that right to be able to, these people are putting their children in these programs, or you have homeless and they're part of an investment scheme, but they don't know that there's no informed consent on this. And I know you've also written about ID 2020 and doing this with homeless people in Austin. Yeah. This is something that it's in every city, it's in every school district. Yeah. It's just not obvious because they're not going to say, we're coming in, we're going to do a social impact bond on your children. Right. They give it a name that is, a warm euphemism.
Well, and they don't say that it all runs on digital identity, which is why it hasn't scaled yet. But I think that the vouchers are a big part of that. Like the voucher will be your digital identity wallet. That's the beginning of your wallet, right? And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, and that's just how it is. Now, I will say, because I've often thought about that Invisible Heart documentary and why they made it. Because I don't think that they would have let that filmmaker have access to him all over the country, you know, all across the globe for 3 years if it didn't advance the program, right? So they're kind of showing both sides, but if it
trying
was
to look objective, like they're putting it out there, pros and cons, but it's really to advance it. It's not really.
Well, I think they're going to pivot the branding of it, right? So it's kind of like what they're doing with the privacy, right? Oh, look at all the leaks. They're really bad. Here's your answer. Your answer is a digital identity, right? And then you can be in control. You can be the entrepreneur of your own data.
Oh, I see.
Right.
So
And
it's not predatory. You're in control. You've got agency. You have your own wallet.
Right.
It's decentralized.
You're sovereign, all of that stuff. So what I'm thinking with social impact bonds and pay for success is that just as the crypto, the breakout of all of that made the libertarians look really bad and greedy, you know, the Bitcoin bro construct, that was positioned to swing back to the decentralized autonomous organizations, the DAOs, you know, like building social structures on machines, like as algorithms. And this is all going to be framed as the commons, right? The tokenized commons. And really what they're after so much is not the money. I mean, the money is, sure, they like money, but they have more, the people who have the most money have more money than they can ever spend. Really what they're after is using the tokens to do the coordination, to run the social computer through the tokens, both at the biological level and at the social level. So if what they can do is position the big bad Goldman Sachs, Pritzker people, right, as the big baddies doing the social impact bonds, and then they could swing back to saying, okay, but it's just a tool. We could use it for the common good, right? Oh, maybe the churches could use them. Maybe these other people could use them, and the bad people wouldn't be in charge. We could be in charge. We could have a city that uses its digital twin to
a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
It would bring equity, which is how they were talking about at the Mormon Transhumanism Conference, is that this is a way to equalize. Well, even Cardano and Hoskinson was talking about, Charles Hoskinson was saying, this is a way to equalize the world, equalize Ethiopia in the world, and bring that equitable access to the financial, or not just financial, the voting, the education, everything would be on this wallet.
Right. And I think that they will be able to sell agency to the conservatives, right? You have choice, you have agency, and then they would sell the social justice stuff to the left. Right. And then everything with a tokens for everyone, everything plays fair. But then the tokens are the signals in the open signals that are running the social computer. And I think that's the ultimate goal, isn't just to make people miserable or kill people or make a bunch of money. Not that they're kind or benevolent in any sort of way, but it's actually to build this computer, build this biohybrid computer. And so they need they need
people distracted, because there's a lot of talk amongst conservative circles about depopulation and the Gates types wanting to kill us all and starve us and take our food, and maybe that's it, depopulation. But I think that's a distraction from what all of this. And it's not to say that he's not involved in that, but that is a distraction from all of the impact markets. No one's talking. I just don't have anybody talking about it.
Right.
Especially since Dallas is a huge player in it. It's never in the news.
Interesting.
You can Google Dallas social impact bonds, Dallas social impact, and you're not going to come up with much. You're going to see social innovation. You're going to see
maybe collective impact. And they might talk
collective
about
impact, and but you won't see them saying what it really is.
Right. And again, for me, for years, I was thinking, this is about money. This is about money, and this is about capital further dominating vulnerable populations, which it is, but that's not the end. That's not the end. If you stop there, you haven't gotten it. And there may be more than just biohybrid social computer. and I'll find that eventually, but that's where I'm at right now. So this guy, this is from one of the Vatican Impact Conferences, and it's on the channel of the Catholic Relief Services. And I would say, again, Catholic Relief Services is very connected to the refugee resettlement stuff, as well as to the Casey Foundation. And the Casey Foundation is like a key player with Strive Together and the human capital finance stuff. So, and it's also in Baltimore.
Strive Together, Cincinnati,
yeah,
same
Knowledge Works. Yeah.
Knowledge Works, and the Commit partnership is the Dallas version.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that Catholic Relief Services is based in Baltimore. And that's also where the Casey Foundation is based in Baltimore. And then you've got Johns Hopkins based in Baltimore. And Open Society's second office after New York is Baltimore. So it's interesting. There's a lot there. And Matthew Bannock actually was with Omidyar Network. Okay, so Pierre Omidyar, formerly of eBay and I think PayPal maybe, that he created the Omidyar Network and is involved in a lot of quote unquote journalism, investigative journalism, but ed tech, deeply involved in ed tech. And so they're presenting here, and I don't have him in the image, but Sal Giambanco was a co-presenter here. And it's quite interesting to me that because Sal Giambanco was a Jesuit priest in San Francisco who was doing ministry to HIV community there. And then somehow transitioned from being a Jesuit priest to working, I think, either for Omidyar or PayPal. Like it was quite a strange career shift, right? And then now he's teamed up. So the Omidyar people were like sort of presenting sponsors of these Vatican conferences. And it's important to know that Pierre Omidyar was advancing good ID, like this idea of a universal identifier. And so I have two reports that I did on essentially Omidyar Network owns The Intercept, right? And a lot of people on the left sort of imagine The Intercept as being like this really great investigative reporting outlet. It's where Glenn Greenwald was previously. But you always realize the thing that is not allowed to be said. And so in this talk, I actually attended a remote presentation by Edward Snowden, who now I understand is like, none of these stories are completely true that we're told about this stuff. And this guy, Jeremy Scahill, who is with Omidyar, was the in-person live commentator. And I talked to him afterwards, and I realized that he was never going to talk about education technology because they're literally pushing. Omidyar Network owns The Intercept, and they're pushing educational technology. So Omidyar is important. And then the other thing is that Pam Omidyar, his wife, has a wearable technology app-based health program called Hope Lab. And so Hope Lab is all about mental health and also about monitoring prenatal stuff. And they were part of a Pay for Success finance deal in South Carolina, targeting low-income pregnant mothers with behavior management apps. So you know, yesterday, I think when we were talking about managing children, right, pushing it down, they want to manage them all the way to pre-K, but I think they actually want to manage them all the way into the womb, like really womb to tomb.
Yeah, right. And you featured the first blockchain baby born in Tanzania, and so you can do that.
Yeah, because you can monitor. In that case, it was monitoring the mother's compliance with the prenatal protocol. Right. And again,
and on this, and I want to point out, you know, at the bottom of the one on the right, the sales pitch for surveillance, family surveillance, all of those players that are listed with that collective impact, third sector capital partners, FSG, nonprofit finance fund, Strive Together, all of those things were modeled here in Dallas, and they brought in the mayor and Todd Williams of Commit. And so this is something that is being scaled. Now there's different regions and there's different reasons for this area versus that area having a focus. You know, with Dallas and with Texas, it's a focus on pre-K and third grade reading scores and college readiness. And I mean, it's not that that's not happening nationwide, but that we probably have the most successful collective impact model because of the background that Todd Williams comes from, Goldman Sachs, and being perfectly positioned, being a Dallas ISD grad. You know, the story, he's got the story, you know, I was not food insecure. Maybe he says he's food insecure and the light bill was turned on, and, you know, those kinds of things. They always draw from a personal struggle in order to pitch, what they're doing. Anyway, I got off track, but I just wanted to point
no, it's
that
important
out,
because
this
you
is
might
the same
think like,
people-
oh, that's South Carolina. No, it's also Dallas. Like once you have the template, you can run it wherever. It's on a leaderboard. It lives in the cloud. You can just pull it down and run it anywhere. And that's, my concern around UNICEF and all this stuff with the kids. And again, not to say that we want to deprive women, low-income women, of having access to healthcare. Like that's not what we're saying. But when Google is weighing in on these things, like when Google is backing these, when they're putting apps in the hands of low-income women and saying, here, consume this good parenting content, right? And we'll know if you accessed it or not. We'll know how you participate in these forums or not. Now, at this first phase, it's voluntary. But at what point you've got a caseworker who's evaluating your compliance to an app, right? And whether it's an app about your eating habits or an app about your digital consumption or your mental health habits or what have you, like your heart rates. And then they're deciding if you're qualified to be a parent, that if you can actually keep your baby if you go to the hospital. Like that's a really intimidating prospect. So we, like, as we're having this whole like single payer discussion, these conversations, we need to understand what these technologies are about. And we need to understand the finance streams because
because it's like in Texas, instead of having investors do it up front, Williams has figured out how to use the legislature to allocate funding to these schemes that taxpayers fund. And they also do it through the local property taxes because the school district will also fund these schemes. So not only is the district paying the nonprofit he started, but the Texas Education Agency. And he writes the bills that allocate the funds that go to these impact investing schemes. And then the technology that is pushed through these bills like Amplify. That is why they're all Texas 2036, the Commit Partnership, the Greater Houston, which is the chamber, and you have the Texas Public Policy Foundation and all of these entities who are saying, yes, we need to get these bills passed to put the children on these devices in the open education resources using this, what will be eventually this augmented reality, this virtual reality technology in the schools, and having 1/10 of America's kids on these. That is huge. Texas is a big target for that.
Huge.
Because of the sheer numbers of children and the higher ed. They've merged the K-12 and higher ed. So one senator leads both. It leads a combined effort. So that way it's much less difficult to push their agenda through one person who's on board with it.
Right. Well, and I would say too, between Texas and California, because you guys are the biggest economies, you have the most people, you have the most kids. Really, in some ways, this idea of unbundling school from a building, selling everybody on choice, framing it as, entrepreneurship and grit and all of that sort of thing. Like, let the nanny state tell me what to do, right? Only they don't actually understand the entirety of the game. And so I can see in some ways that Texas is probably an easier to target for a lot of these policies because it kind of segues with the mythic story that Texas tells about itself, like traditionally, is that we go our own way. We, don't boss us around. Less government is better. But they're not realizing that within the Ant Computer program, that's perfect. Right, but they don't understand that their choice means that they're going to be a tokenized asset in the Ant Computer. Like no one said, by the way, like you think that you're sovereign and you're making all your own choices, but like the technologies that are embedded in this and the tokenization means that really you're living in our box. Like you guys are hamsters.
We need you to respond like that, and they are.
Yeah,
and so it is in every legislative session. It's the polarizing issue, and it never passes, but it keeps everybody in their camps busy. The dialectic, the struggle, and the opposing forces.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it just shows how much the psychology is part of the game. Like when we talk later about war, like this, and I know I shouldn't frame this as like war, but these engagements that are coming are engagements in consciousness, right? It's a struggle for attention. It's a struggle for clarity. It's a struggle for what story that we're living in. And, I can totally see that Texas has the capacity to hold a lot of really interesting storylines, that are playing out on this big canvas, there. So, all right. So this is
my favorite. Yeah.
Well, no, go ahead. You can. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, it sort of ties into this because Evan Baer, but so the girl, Genevieve Collins, who works for iStation, which was probably the most widely used technology software that came out of No Child Left Behind, because the demand, it opened up the marketplace for reading response to intervention software. And so they cornered the market for about 20 years. So she's the daughter of the billionaire who runs and owns iStation and is, a $100 million company. She goes before the legislature and she's there with her Americans for Prosperity group that she started. She doesn't say she's there with iStation. She starts lamenting the poor reading scores in Texas. And I'm thinking, but you work for iStation, who's been largely teaching kids to read instead of teachers, on these devices. And she's pushing for the money to follow the child because the reading scores are so bad. I'm thinking, do you hear yourself? Like, how did you learn to read, Genevieve? Yeah. So anyway, so then Evan Baer is also there saying we need the money to follow. I could have used that for my child who's not neurotypical, born with some, and that doesn't mean that I don't have empathy and deep concern, especially, going to college to be a special ed teacher. That was my goal, is to be a special ed teacher. I have the tremendous empathy and concern for how the kids are not getting what they need in Texas with regard to special ed. But that's all by design. The same people pushing the vouchers are the ones who set these rules and denied the children the services to save money and to break the system. So then you've got Evan Baer here, Learn Capital, managing partner, and he's now in the Vatican. So go ahead.
Flourishing. Look, do they not look like they're all flourishing?
Yeah.
So, so this is just the image. There's quite a photo album that goes along with this. They definitely have a good budget for photography. This is the building that they were in. I think it's called Casa Pio. It's in Vatican City. And so there's an image of Evan, and he's sitting next to this woman, Erica Karp, with a K-A-R-P. So I'm going to talk a little bit about at least the people who are sitting on either side of Evan. But first, this is Casina Pio the Fourth in the Vatican, and I'll share the link to the slides. There's a whole book about the iconography of this building, and it's amazing paintings, carvings, gardens, fountains. It's all geometric, and I think there's all sorts of like sacred geometry and storytelling and archetypes and things embedded in this architectural space. But this is the room where they, in Casina Pio the Fourth, that they had the event, Aula Magna. So it's kind of interesting. There's this oval table in the middle of the room, and then there's a bank of, it's almost like bleachers, kind of like very fancy leather bleachers, on either side, 2 and 3 rows where all
maybe it's like the debate chambers of the.
Yeah, it's the Pope debate chambers. Yeah. So I guess this is where they were set up for their, couple of days of conferencing. And I had actually written about this building back in last summer. In a whole the series that I was doing on refugees, Lynn, and because it was such a striking building, and my background is art history and historic preservation, so I was kind of captivated by these gardens and these structures because they all seem to be loaded with symbolism and iconography, and so it came up because essentially in this series I was looking at Pope John Paul II and his introduction of a number of policies that would set in place what is to come with this Evangelii Gaudium, this light to the poor kind of program. And the context of it was, so I found out about this Casina Pio because it was the place that the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences would meet. And it was established by John Paul II in 1994. Okay. And so they gather these social scientists at the Vatican to do these findings. And it was within the context of the last global economic crash, and Nicolas Sarkozy, who was Catholic, had tapped Joseph Stiglitz to run a commission about the measurement of economic performance and social progress. And so what we were seeing in the post-2008 crash was the languaging away from full-on greed is good capitalism towards the stakeholder capitalism model that would center quote unquote well-being and happiness. Right.
Oh, and that's what I was going to say about Sir Ronald Cohen is he's like, now we've been greedy capitalists. Now we move into this stakeholder capitalism to tackle the world's most pressing issues of you know.
You're really good at that. You're really, So that's where. So it is. But they want, and what it took me a while to realize, again, until I keep holding up this book, The Pervasive Computing, is that the well-being and happiness is programmed. And later on in this article, I actually talk about the fact that when they're developing what they call a cyber-physical socio-technical system, essentially they have to code social rules into the built environment, right? And they either have to code the rules into the built environment or they have to make us all the same. And they're kind of doing a little bit of both, right? They want to make you a global citizen so that the differences among peoples becomes more narrow. And then they're going to try to also code the built environment with that. So that's why I think that these refugee camps are test beds, because they're developing smart environments that resonate with smaller groups of people, right? Because they're saying, what if you were, someone who grew up in a certain culture with a built environment that was coded to that culture, and then you got dislocated and you were placed into a new robot, but that the rules of that robot were, maybe not completely different, but substantially different than where you grew, how you grew up, right? So it's not just like, I don't know, when you do a study abroad program and you have to learn a new language and new customs, but literally, and that's in relation to people mostly, and yes, built environment and economic structures, but this is actually a robot, right? All the sensors are going to be responding to keep you on track. That's the cybernetics. So if they're going to keep you quote unquote happy and well, they have to program that. And so they actually have to harvest all the data off of us to figure out what the metrics are for happy. Like, what does happy look like?
Well, and it also makes me think of Andreas Schleicher, who's touring the globe, talking through OECD, and he came to Dallas, and he's talking about education and showcases what's happening in Singapore or Finland or Switzerland, and it is moving everyone into the same direction, even though he's displaying the differences, but really everyone's moving in the same direction for this global education future.
Just to make you happy. They care about us being happy, right? They just need to know us well enough to figure out what to put on the dashboard, the happy dashboard, right? And so I'll just read, this is from the article, Wellness Metrics, Teaching Machines to Live With Us, Synthetic Pretenders, Part 15D. And it says, the commission's findings, and this is like the Happiness Commission, which were released in the aftermath of the 2008 global economic implosion, set the stage for stakeholder capitalism and began to walk back GDP as the primary measure of economic vitality. Stiglitz is a member of the Pontifical Academy of the Social Sciences, established by Pope John Paul II in 1994. So again, Stiglitz is sort of part of this whole milieu of the social scientists at the Vatican. And I would have to say, like, if most people, if you ask them, if you knew that the Vatican had a stable of social scientists ready to like sort of roll out the programs, you wouldn't even know that group exists. But the previous...
And if you did, you would stop giving money that would go there.
Yeah.
Right?
Or you try to get an invitation to their fancy dinner party. Maybe.
Or that.
Depending on who
Have you
were.
ever been to the Vatican?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's funny because, I'm a little over 5'8", and everything is like, all the doorways are like so teeny tiny. It's like, the people look like they must have been 4 feet tall, and you're going through these tiny little walkways. It's fascinating.
Oh, wow. Okay, so anyway, so this is all about the happiness stuff. And so this is important to know that the Vatican is sort of in the center of the new happiness and well-being economy. Now, who were the sponsors of this Humanity 2.0 event at the Vatican? Well, FTX, EU. So there we go, the Sam Bankman-Fried implosion, right? FTX, whoosh. The Ford Foundation. Of course, the Ford Foundation is sort of central to all impact finance, them and the Rockefellers. ESG News, and the Laudato Si Challenge, which is, again, this idea of the poverty stuff from the Vatican. But
and real quick on the ESG, and this is important to bring this up because people are aware now of, you hear a lot about the social credit score, which you and I have, or you've helped me figure out that's a tool. It's not that there aren't social skills and social compliance metrics, but that it's the Chinese social credit scoring. That's not actually what's happening. But with the ESG, people are aware that is a way to make corporations comply. It's similar to what they're doing with SEL in the schools. But explain that ESG is it's not necessarily what people think that it is.
Well. Okay, so it's aligned
quickly because it's important. Because I hear it all the time.
Right. Well, so I think that there's some idea that there's some big bad people outside of the United States who are making the ESG metrics come in to play, right? That someone is targeting U.S. companies and making them do things that they don't want to do. Now, I would say in the case of like small town local businesses, that may be the case. But in these Fortune 500 companies, they all know what's coming. Like they've known that this plan is in place because what you have to understand is the future is sort of threading capitalism as we knew it with an engineered economy. But the engineered economy is with tokens. It's not socialism, right? The framing that it's socialism and communism. Now, I'm not socialist or communist either, but the challenge at this point is to bring the two together. You've got free market capitalism and you have planned economy, socialism and communism, but they're going to come together in tokenization in the Web3 market. And they're going to tell a story that is they're going to hope to tell a story that will somehow get everybody on board and frame it at the token engineering as free market opportunities with safeguards and UBI for the progressives, right? They have to bring, because this is a whole world program. The whole world is supposed to be on the ant computer, right? And I think, honestly, the Cold War is not what we thought. And we were told a story that was woefully incomplete because everybody knew that meeting up at some age of Aquarius meant we were going to be in the omega point. So everyone was kept in their stories for certain amounts of time, but this is the unity. This is the unity moment. So when you've got people like Mr. Humble driving around Austin going, well, I'm a sovereign person and I'm great at trading Bitcoin and I'm going to be, I'm going to weather all of this. Y'all schmucks can just whatever. I mean, he's
or even
in that
the
story.
Ryan Binkley guy who's the pastor running for president who I keep seeing everywhere. He's all about the unity. You hear that recurring theme of unity.
Yeah.
But it's not in the way it's unity. It's everyone on the same page, but the environmental, social, and governance pieces of ESG are within that tokenized economy that they're setting up. It's
human capital and natural capital. So I think and I always thought it was kind of an odd choice of words because the environmental, that's pretty clear. It's largely the carbon trading market. And again, all of the big oil companies knew this. Like they've been part of this all along, right? They're shifting their stuff around. They're not going out of business. You think Exxon's going out of business? BP? No, they're not. They've known. They have their market analysts.
Schools.
Right.
The same schools that were named after these
moving
big
their money
oil
around.
Families are now partnering with this model. Mm-hmm.
Right. So
okay.
And then
sorry,
social,
I derailed
and then you've got,
but I thought it was important.
I'm trying to remember the social part. And then the governance is almost like, are there enough women on your board? Which is, fine. I'm all for women being on boards, but it seems like such a small, minor thing. But I think governance is actually cybernetics. I think they say to your face, like, oh, we want to make sure you have a board that is well represented with diverse racially and with women, right? Let's count all the people on your board. But I don't think actually that's a wordplay. The thing that they're not saying is that the governance is the cybernetic system, is the token engineering system. And then I can't really remember, I guess the social is maybe the dealing with poverty or social issues. But I think the social is the social physics, our relationships through signaling, through the tokens. And then the environment is the game board. So you've got the E, environment is the game board. You've got the S, which is social, which is the signaling and relationships between people and the environment, the signal. And then you've got governance, which is the cybernetic steering, which is, the state of the game and the rules in the smart contract layer. So I think that's actually, I've never really said it like that before, but I think that's actually what ESG means. They say environmental social governance, but I think it's actually natural capital, social physics, and cybernetics.
Okay, well said.
So,
and then you already said that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ford. Yeah, and the Laudato Si. So FTX, I think, is very interesting, though. So it turns out the guy who's sitting on, here we go, the guy who's sitting on the other side of Evan is the FTX Europe guy. So Marcel Lutcher. So he got quite the little, I'll talk a little bit about the other woman in a minute. So he is the FTX names, this is ESG News, of course, the other sponsor. FTX names Marcel Lutcher head of regulatory strategy for Europe. So I don't know if Marcel still has the same job that he did last fall, but anyway, that's what he was doing last fall. And I'm going to take a minute, Lynn, just to talk a little bit about FTX. Like I wrote, I've kind of backed off of it because I got distracted, but I had this whole God's Eye View series that was looking at poker and game theory and sort of AI and emergence. And so the fourth section was called God's Eye View Part 4, the language of a heartless charity. And I think that this is kind of the theme for the Vatican, right? This is heartless charity. And the image that I have here that I chose is the logo for something called effective altruism. And it's sort of like this cultish movement that was embedded in the FTX culture, this idea of evidence-based altruism, right? Which is totally aligned with outcomes-based contracts and dashboards.
Yeah.
Now, their logo is a heart. It's sort of a fat, squiggly line, like a line drawing of a simple heart shape contained within an electric light bulb. Now, I find that fascinating because, we've talked about the torus field, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. The torus, the donut, that toroidal motion.
And the heart being the main electrical force. Like the heart is way more electrical than the brain. And so, I think that they're after people's hearts, really, in some ways, this thing. So they're framing their charity in this case. I'm just going to click through to the...
Well, also the light bulb, because light, when we're thinking about from a divine...
And you were saying about light.
Yeah, and you're talking about God's eye view and thinking about light in terms of the faith and biblical perspective is that, God said, let there be light. God is considered the light, there's light and dark. And then you also hear a lot about lumen,
right.
Illuminati, lumen.
Well, Lumen was the OER, David Wiley's company was the Lumen Learning. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting piece of it too. But the toroidal piece is, that's fascinating. I didn't know that the heart rolled up almost like Pillsbury dough, like those dough, it unrolls like that. So when it pumps, they didn't really know this until fairly recently that you can unroll the heart muscle. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, and the electrical stuff is super important. So I think that there's a tell there, right, in that logo of the heart in the light bulb. And again, I'm in Philadelphia, so we've got Ben Franklin Electricity. We didn't have Bell Labs, but Bell Labs has been behind a lot of these technologies too. That's in New Jersey.
And Edison and the light bulb.
Exactly. So this is just touching on Sam Bankman-Fried and Alameda Research, because I hadn't looked into him at the time when all of this first started. But then he felt like a distraction. I'm like, who is this kid, right? Like all the focus is on him, and there's something else going on here besides what they're saying is going on. And so when I went back for this series and looked at his LinkedIn, I saw that for 2 months he had worked as the director of development for this thing called the Center for Effective Altruism. Now, I have to say, like in the Web3 spaces, or maybe just young people these days, I would never imagine putting something that I only spent 2 months at as on your resume, unless you were, just in college and you were trying to fill out and pad for, every little internship or something, right?
Yeah.
But this guy had left, and then he went right from there to found the Alameda Research. And so I'm just going to read this little bit of this paragraph. It says, after Jane Street, but before starting Alameda Research, Sam Bankman-Fried, worked for 2 months as director of development for the Center for Effective Altruism, an Oxford-based think tank / charity started in 2012 by philosophers William MacAskill and Toby Ord. Bankman-Fried's embrace of data-driven charity was spotlighted by the mainstream media. Surely that agenda will continue to advance along with universal basic income, digital citizenship, and token engineering. In reality, it's about installing the policy, financial, and sensor infrastructure needed to catalyze post-Moore's Law computing. Distributed ledger technology has always been meant to function as a decentralized steering wheel, guiding and harvesting the wisdom of crowds. The Center for Effective Altruism operates out of Trajan House in Oxford, UK, a space that it shares with the Future of Humanity Institute, led by Nick Bostrom, an interdisciplinary project focused on big picture ideas around human civilization, and that would seem very in keeping with Humanity 2.0. The Global Priorities Institute, working in the area of decision making around doing the most good. The Forethought Foundation, funding research around long-termism. The Center for the Governance of AI, addressing transitioning humans to an advanced AI era. And the Global Challenges Project, offering workshops to students about existential risk and moral decision-making. And Our World in Data, a collaboration between researchers at Oxford University and the Global Change Data Lab. And what I found was really interesting is this guy, Eric Drexler, and Drexler was connected to, what was it? I mean, I think he was connected to Texas, to Richardson, the NanoRex stuff. I'm losing track, but he was a molecular nanotechnology theorist. And in 1987, he wrote this book, Engines of Creation, The Coming Era of Nanotechnology. So that's 87. Like I graduated high school in 87. And so he is actually a member of a lot of these initiatives that are embedded in this Center for Effective Altruism. And Drexler was the one who proposed this idea of gray goo, a scenario in which self-replicating robots take over the world through ecophagy. And it's weird because it was actually in a Super Bowl ad this year with the star of White Noise, Adam Driver. And so I'm going to just show this and then we can move on. But I think it's important to understand that effective altruism is connected to FTX, and it's connected to evidence-based solutions. And all of these evidence-based solutions are connected to outcomes-based government contracting. And the data that's tracked against those are being fed into the AI to create the singularity, which is the stuff they're there to supposedly try to deal with at this Oxford Institute. So I'll just play the ad real quick. There's an office, eerie office, Adam Driver sitting at a computer.
Squarespace is a website that makes websites.
And he's in this desert. Kind of looks like Utah a little bit. These big rock formations.
Squarespace is a website that makes websites. Meaning it could create itself websites Making websites. Websites making websites. Very good, Adam. I'm making websites. We're in a closed loop of creation. It's the singularity. You did it, Adam Driver.
No, you did it, Adam Driver!
So I know that seems a bit odd, but think about what he's saying there, Lynn. Like, a digital object makes more digital objects, right? In that case, it's a website making websites. So what Drexler was saying was this gray goo nanotechnology that was self-replicating. The problem with nanotechnology has always been this idea of sticky fingers or fat fingers. Like, you've got these teeny tiny things and you can't manipulate them. And so they've been trying to figure out how to put the particles, the nanoparticles, together in ways that make sense. And I think ultimately, rather than having, I think they initially thought there would be a 3D printer and it would, like, you'd go into some CAD, computer aided design system, and then it would replicate in some machine, like a 3D printer, your nanotechnology, programmable matter. That's kind of like what James Tour was after. But they could never figure out how to build that thing. And so I think now what they're looking at is using bioreactors, right? Using bodily functions with nanoparticles in them to use both biology and chemistry and frequency to combine the particles in a space of biology rather than a 3D printer. So that's the gray goo part of the nanotech. But this idea of self-replicating digital objects, I think, is really interesting to consider even within the OER. He's talking about websites, but it could be that, all of a sudden you have AI in education, and AI keeps making more educational modules, right? Like, is there a way to turn these things off, and the personalization and the fracturing of reality? I don't know. Maybe that's a bit too much to think about, but it's strange.
Well, it makes you, it's like dimensions that just keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, I wrote this whole long article about essentially heartless charity and effective altruism, and how this relates to decision theory and the singularity and signaling and language. So, maybe if people get a chance, they can look at it at some point. I forgot how good it was. I was reading it over today and I'm like, oh, wow, this is too much to unpack just in the context of this video. But the fact that FTX is in with the Vatican should say something. Like, this wasn't just a small little thing. This is a very big thing that was happening here with the Vatican.
There are theories about the Vatican and some of it's not theories, that's documented, how money was not, there's something about handling money at the Vatican, so they would bring in the Jews. And I think you had done some research on the Conversos and the connection with Jewish leaders and Catholic leaders back in early Vatican. Let me think. And then there was something about, I know, the other was there's the black pope that is behind, there's the control behind the Vatican, not black as in race, but a dark pope behind the scenes. And those are theories that are out there about the global finance and Vatican controlling much of our economic direction, where everything's headed. So that's an interesting piece of this too, that I don't fully understand. I don't study all of that, but.
Well, I would say, the other thing that I thought was interesting, having visited, spent some time in Salt Lake City, was that I went to the Cathedral of the Magdalene, Mary Magdalene, which I think is the only cathedral to Mary Magdalene in North America. And so it's the main cathedral in Salt Lake City. And what's really interesting is in the chapel off to the side at the entrance, in the 1990s for Vatican II, they reworked this little side chapel and installed 2 new stained glass windows in commemoration of Vatican II. And one was the shift of the church towards ecumenicalism. And then the other was to the modern world. And the other was the shift to the modern world. And that was represented by literally the UN. It was the UN sort of like flat world logo. light
in
unto the
same
world,
class.
like Lux Urbi or something like that, light unto the world. And again, light, that creepy guy, he was talking about light. Oh, could always use some more light, right? Little Illuminati. So it's quite interesting to imagine the Catholic Church working in collaboration, perhaps, with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because if that were the case, like behind the scenes, and then, and even the other churches, I've talked before about the mega churches and, the Baptists. The Baptists have these long alliances with the Rockefellers. I had no idea that the Rockefeller was Baptist and behind a lot of Baptist education, higher education. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. And again, do I believe that everybody understands what game is afoot? I don't. But at some point, those of us who do need, and you do a great job of taking the story to the streets and really explaining it in layman's terms what's happening. So,
well, and I was thinking about, with Evan, okay, so let's assume that, let's say if he was watching this, he's a nice guy, friendly, extrovert, told, us about his kids and his wife, and, he's a family man, and it's, thinking about, so what would his response be to all of this? Because obviously we've painted a picture that's much broader than what he may see, or he may see even more than what we see, because he's investing and he's dabbling in so many different things with this Learn Capital, and they're at the forefront of these emerging technologies, and he has figured out, he knows, because when we were talking in the lobby, when we met him, my friend and I, Mary and I, were listening to the results of a state board hearing, the vote on curriculum, and he was dialed into what we were talking about. He knew about it, and he knew all the players in Texas education. So that told me he's right there in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. And he's very charming, and he's bright. He's well connected with the UT landscape, and all the UT holds tremendous power, UT grads and the UT network. So, I think once they know, there's a responsibility. And the other thing is that the things that he is investing in for other people's children, his children are not doing that. And that's where I think you can really get people to see, hey, think about that. Is this okay for us or for y'all to be doing that to children when you wouldn't endorse it for your own?
Yeah, I think it's important
to think about. So I'm appealing to you, Evan Bear, human to human.
Yeah.
Person to person, parent to parent, that this is not okay.
Right.
And we know what these technologies are set up for, where they came from and where they're going.
Yeah.
Now, whether you know that or not, you are an investor. And so therefore there's a responsibility.
Right. I think the challenge with some of these folks is that, like, this idea that the future of Web3 is a given. Right. It's this idea of human
ride the wave,
and that there's nothing to be done. And so best prepare the children for the ride, so to speak. And I think that's, and they don't look at how the particulars, because it gets a little ugly when you get down to, like, oh, what happens if somebody's shorting a bond offer on, a school district's third grade rating scores, right? They don't really.
And maybe he doesn't know that Marath is doing that. Maybe he's thinking Marath. These guys talk in faith words. Yeah. Evan presents himself as a Christian. So does Mike Marath. Yeah. But it doesn't compute with the faith that I am too. And I was raised Baptist, and it doesn't jibe with what the Bible says
well, I think some of the stuff, if I had to guess, like in certain circles, this idea of the free market is the optimization metric. And again, that's what the hedge fund guys are, the people who are the poker players. They have a pristine belief, maybe God and free markets, right? Like they're maybe neck and neck, right? And so
it's free will, free markets, yes,
they're not acknowledging the tokenized aspect, right? It isn't going to be a truly free market. It is going to be embedded with cybernetics. And I don't know that there's ever been a free market per se, but there's stories about what that means, right? And even down to like,
sure makes it sounds real good. Yeah.
I mean, and applying it to anything, like we saw the woman at the Arise Dutch Netherlands thing go, oh my gosh, look at the free market of the fungus on the tree root, trading phosphorus or whatever, like everything. Like she was like, look at that free market. And now the fungus is pruning the tree root to get more phosphorus. And like she framed it all as a market. And that's the thing, like our biology is being framed as a market, right? The biology, biochemistry of how our body works is being framed as markets. Everything becomes a market. And then within those markets, bets are made. So then I would guess, like from the Christian side, like I know people have certain ideas about gambling, right? And so then where does that come in?
Oh yeah. Well, even with the Islamic finance and Islamic blockchain, there's this whole debate about whether it is okay, because you can't. There are certain things you can't make money on, and it's this gray area within Islamic finance, talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency and all of that, which is interesting. And then I also think it's interesting. You showcase those tweets that you've put side by side from Nicholas Berggruen of the Berggruen Institute, talking about reducing everyone to basic value, and just by being hold value. And I think too, the word values, which we've talked about before on some of these, is that these traditional values or Christian values or whatever the faith is, values, and those words, those hold different meanings.
Yeah, they're. I'm really starting to appreciate the way in which language and word choice and the double meanings and adding even meanings that are unspoken to words is how the game is played, for sure. So this is the woman on his other side is Erica Karp, and this is her LinkedIn. It says that she is the executive managing director and chief impact officer at Pathstone, which is impact investing. And she must be pretty connected because she has 19,000 followers on LinkedIn. And it says, Erica Karp brings both pragmatism and intensity to driving the discipline of sustainable and impact investing. Having spent decades on Wall Street, Erica developed a deep belief in environmental, social, and governance analysis as a critical input to investment decision-making, right? Because Wall Street has always cared about that, right?
And isn't it interesting when you look at the word equity, all these years, private equity, but then now that term equity has made its way through the education and workspace for a different meaning. It's different than,
She envisions a world where capitalism fully values, there you go, you've got values, all forms of capital, including human and natural capital, and where investments serve to foster a regenerative and inclusive global economy. So
Well, I used to be so fixated on Singapore. I would study Singapore because all these people like Todd Williams and the Gates funded Educate Texas, and this whole delegation went to Singapore to study their education system. And I started studying Singapore and realized they have really no natural resources. It's predominantly human capital, which is, and it's a very new nation. It's maybe, I don't know, 60 something years old. It's not that old. It's this tiny dot. It's an island, and it's almost like a United Nations test nation.
Yeah, because it's like these little islands. They go and they
and you can basically use it as a petri dish to study. And then Andreas Fleischer, and they're always talking about Singapore education, but it's not apples to apples. And they don't have compulsory special ed, or they do now supposedly, but it takes a while to get there. But it's interesting how the human capital versus the natural resources, that's something that you talked about the oil companies, how they're moving into the human capital.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, the regenerative and inclusive. So inclusive means no one left behind, right? Everybody is on the blockchain. And then the regenerative goes in with the natural capital, a lot of the work that Leo has been doing, right? About, biodiversity and carbon, and I've been thinking more and more about like the RFK Jr. Presidential candidacy bid, right? And so on the one hand, he has this identity as the health freedom fighter, right? But his prior identity was an environmental crusader, right? Corporate environmental crusader for the most part, but that was his, and they don't actually, there's tension in those because the people who like one don't necessarily like the other. And so
totally. And you saw that through the whole, all the, imposed lockdowns. You've got the medical freedom people and then who may have also been environmentalists, but then you have people who are,
there weren't many of those. I don't know that there, there was not a lot. That the Venn diagram on that was pretty small.
It was like, yeah. But of course we've met some of those, which has been great to see the ones who realize, okay, this isn't adding up.
Yeah, this isn't adding up. But so if in the regenerative space, though, think about how much of the health freedom movement from really the earliest months pivoted into blockchain. Right? Like we saw that. Like I knew what blockchain was and I was like, guys, don't put that down. That's not our thing, right? We don't want that. And they're like, no, we need it. We need it for our deplatforming and we need it for our, our sovereign money token thingies, whatever. Like we're going off the grid, but we totally need our blockchain, right?
It attracts a certain renegade kind of anarchy, but then it also attracts the shrink the government and less government types, the libertarians, and it's interesting.
So I could see, because I'm trying to figure out how Kennedy is going to address his climate stance. And somebody told me that there's some upcoming event that's like an ivermectin kind of event, and they're going to have a surprise guest come and talk about climate, right? So like we can maybe imagine who that might be, right? So he's got to come up with a story to tell about his climate past that's going to be attractive to the health freedom community. And I could
I think it just shifts. I think that the health stuff will go by the wayside, but the climate, the extreme shifts, whether it's the tornadoes or hurricanes or droughts, all of those extreme shifts will then move us into the metrics that say, okay, well, our behavior triggered this or that. I could be wrong, but I don't know.
I'm thinking about his story. So I could see, I've had numerous people approach me who identify as both health freedom and maybe permaculture, right? And then you've got people like Tom Cowan who's selling he's got his little farm going and all the stuff. And you've got the Zach Bush, right? And he's got his supplement business and all this stuff. And I could see those people, Joel Salatin, these people, even the beef thing, we talked about the beef thing before, like pivoting into a trust supply chain on blockchain, right? And then using behaviors like pastured grass-fed beef or something like that, put it on blockchain and then tie it into regenerative finance. And so if Kennedy can find a way, and not that I'm advising him on that, because I'm very skeptical about this whole thing, but if I were in his corner figuring out how are you going to make this mesh with the health freedom people without turning them off, I think he could use the blockchain angle and say, well, we're for free markets in environmentalism too. And look, it could fit with all of your programs as well, you sovereignty people. Look at the beef thing, right? Look at, it could almost be like that beef initiative as a setup for his campaign, right? Yeah, I care about climate, but I also care about free market economics. We should let the consumers decide. Let's just put it on blockchain and then you can trust the source of your local quality beef, right? And by the way, the manure is doing all sorts of carbon stuff on the pastures. And so I can kind of see this.
He would garner support of some of those don't tread on me types.
Yeah. If you can make a market out of it, right? If you can make the market out of it. So I feel like this ESG stuff is important and it'll be interesting to see. So, but just to get back to Erica, so, she's been really concerned being on Wall Street for so many years that everything be, ESG aligned. So she's with this Pathstone. She was formerly 7 years, this Cornerstone Capital Group. But for 13 years before that, she was a managing director at UBS Bank. And she was actually the head of global sector research. Prior to that, she was at Credit Suisse first in Boston for 8 years. And then before that, she started out at IBM. So she was a sales rep at IBM and then went on to Credit Suisse and UBS. And so I think it's really important to understand, and I've hit on this before, but UBS Bank was working with IXO Foundation on the human capital, and they were specifically working in the space of smart impact bonds. Okay, so this is a slide from 2018 about an event about the creation of smart impact bonds. So these would be smart contracts embedded in impact finance. Now, I don't know exactly which smart bonds those would be, if those would be green bonds or education bonds. I had concerns before the lockdowns, because this happened in 2018, that big picture learning, which is really sort of the darling of the competent, progressive, competency-based, work-based learning model that's gone global, that they would, something would pop off in Australia because they're working on smart impact bonds there and they have a big picture learning down there. So I just think that we should be mindful. But it's interesting, again, to see this lady sitting, you've got the FTX, effective altruism guy, Europe on one side, and then you've got Erica Karp, the UBS Credit Suisse on the other side about the ESG investing. So, I'm sure Evan had some nice little chats during the breaks with his
new friends,
with his new buddies. So these were some of the other delegates. I'll just mention this person, Tae Yu, the former Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs and ESG for Cisco. Igor Perisic, the Vice President of Engineering and General Manager, Google. Again, all the Google email accounts. Laura Taylor, the Deputy Director of the Wellbeing Research Center at University of Oxford. So we've got the well-being. James Pawelski, Director of Education in the Positive Psychology Center. That's here at Penn, here in Philly. Somebody from Gallup. And I know that the Gallup people have been really focused on entrepreneurship for a long time, entrepreneurship education. Again, be an agent in the game. Bob Boister, President and CEO of the Fetzer Institute. Now, the Fetzer Institute is really important because that's the guy who is into all the spiritualism and the mindfulness and consciousness studies. Somebody from the Human Network Initiative at Harvard Medical School. Jose Pacheco, co-director, Master of Engineering in Advanced Manufacturing and Design at MIT. So that's interesting, advanced manufacturing for this happiness project. And then it goes on to say there's a Father Philip Larry, Dean of Philosophy at the Pontifical Lateran University, Letty Garcia, Associate Director, Leadership Initiative at Harvard Business School. So Harvard is well represented. Again, that's Ronald Cohen's stomping grounds. Evan Baer there. Doug Arndt, Director. Now, this is interesting. The Executive Director and Strategic Public-Private Partnerships for the National Renewable Energy Lab. So that's the thing that worries me the most, is this idea of bioreactors and alternative energy and nanoparticles and if we're the batteries. That's really concerning to me. Somebody with salary finance, somebody from IEEE, University of Warwick. There's a Templeton. So we've got Fetzer and the Templeton Foundation. Baylor. So there's a Baylor, there's a Texas, right? Byron Johnson, Director, Institute for Studies of Religion at Baylor. Is Baylor in Houston?
Waco.
Oh, Waco. Okay. And then this other person, Institute for Strategic Clarity. And then
I'll have to send Byron this after we're done.
Yeah. Here you go, Byron.
Hi, Byron.
Hi. And just
I have a little information for you.
Exactly. And then so participants, we've gone off, I mentioned most of these, but there's Australian Catholic University, Loyola University in New Orleans, Villanova, of course, that's my stomping grounds, Catholic University of America, Mind Foundry, the Swiss Institute for Alternative Thinking, but you got Learn Capital in there with Google and Cisco. And then, super fancy dinner party. There's Evan right in the middle. He's always looking for the camera, Lynn. Can you see?
I know.
He's looking
very
right.
Cute. He's really cute. And he's got these blue eyes. And he's got this kind of boyish charm. And yeah, he's like, oh, hey, camera.
Well, they're having a great time. This is a very, if you're listening and you're not seeing
Look at the
picture.
art on the wall.
I know. I like to kind of try to analyze what the art is saying, right? And Venetian chandeliers and actual candles, lit, candelabras at every table. I mean, no expense.
The ambiance is just incredible in the room.
So imagine the people who are sitting there for 3 days, right? And they're making these plans. This is how this stuff happens, right? This is how the legislation shows up. And yeah,
right.
It's
like
that's
the
how it works.
Global Impact Investing Network when Judith Rodin, deploys the message from whatever that was years ago.
Yeah.
Rockefeller.
There's the big party, and we weren't invited. So I just want to hit on Cisco. Again, one of the people was from Cisco. Charles, I don't know if you say it Fadel or Fidel, Fadel. He was the head of the head of global lead on education for Cisco from 1999 to 2011. And then he left Cisco and he went to Harvard to set up the Center for Curriculum Redesign. So when we're looking at what OER is, when we're looking at competency-based education, learning modules, digital lockers, mastery transcripts, all of that kind of came out of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I think Charles Fidel was a leader in that space. And he was one of the key people behind the 21st century skills. So whenever you're seeing portrait of a graduate, 21st century skills, aligned to the Chamber of Commerce needs, it comes from somewhere. And the somewhere that it comes from is his legacy. This is what he did.
They all say the same thing. It drives me bonkers. They came up with these graduate profiles, and it's and I try and tell people, I'm like, all this language like reskilling, upskilling. Do you think that your legislator came up with that brilliant idea? No, all of this stuff rolls down from somewhere else, and it's these sometimes and
I'm sure Charles didn't actually come up with all of this himself. He was the implementer. He ran the program to get it all done. Right. But these are the key pieces, right? You've got a mastery transcript, which is your digital twin in your wallet. You've got the 21st century skills badges, which includes the soft skills and social emotional learning that are aligned to the workforce and the tokens. You've got, he wrote a book about AI in education. So that's the other thing. So you've got the cybernetic feedback loops in there. And then you've got the competencies, right? The work-based learning, the project-based learning. So these are all things that, again, were probably started 20 years ago, easily, if not earlier. I mean, they probably go back you could say they go back to the 40s or they go back to the 70s, but definitely for the last 20, 25 years, this has been ramping up. And the thing that frustrates me is that probably if you went and tried to talk to these people, they wouldn't admit to themselves what they built.
Yeah.
They would not acknowledge what it was and where it was headed. Now, I'm not saying that we're doing this to make them wrong or bad, but we actually have to look at it and see it in retrospect, and have some self-reflection about how all of this fits into the financial markets. Because that's what I say at Penn. I'm like, all these graduate programs essentially are sub-programs of Wharton Business School. The Graduate School of Education at Penn, it's essentially a sub-program of Wharton. It's there to serve Wharton. The Wharton alumni. The Fells Government Center, there to serve the Wharton alumni. The social sciences, social welfare programs, there to serve the Wharton alumni. They're all there under the business school, which, by the way, is named after John Huntsman of Utah, who made his fortune in styrofoam chemicals. So if you actually just look a little bit, it's not beautiful, but you get clear. You get clear on it if you're actually able to look at it.
I have a friend in the styrofoam business, and I'm going to send him this.
I know. Well, then he also went into the genome. So you've got all of these super toxic chemicals. And then, guess what? Now we're going to fund genomic research so we can cure the cancer we created. And by the way, now we're going to learn how to play with bioreactors now that we've mapped all the genomes. It's a crazy town. So anyway, this is just the website for the Center for Curriculum Redesign. They could use a better logo. It's a pretty ugly logo there. And this is the advisory board for this. And we're finishing up, Lynn. I know that let's not do the military stuff today. Just heads up. We'll finish the Vatican. That was enough. And we'll come back to the military. But so this is the advisory board for Humanity 2.0. One of the people that sort of stood out to me, this guy, Bill Hilliff, I guess, and he's the CEO of Vulcan. And I don't know if you remember Vulcan from well, actually, it's Paul Dintersmith. Do you remember back in the day when I was writing about Dintersmith?
Yeah.
And I mean, this was back in 2018. And I'm like, here, Ted Dintersmith, the venture capitalist, is not here to save your neighborhood school. And essentially, he was putting in the competency program. But in this article that I talk about, I describe a gathering in 2015 hosted by Vulcan with representatives of Digital Promise, the Clayton Christensen Institute, and again, he was LDS, and Dreambox. And it said that Vulcan Incorporated is the engine behind Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's network of organizations. Mr. Allen had his hands in many enterprises. In addition to being an incubator for innovative technology, the firm manages extensive real estate holdings, ownership of the Seattle Seahawks, and the Allen Brain Institute. So this idea, and then it says a number of the guests at the Vander Ark/Vulcan meetup created these videos. So it's Tom Vander Ark again, buddy with Pavel Luksha, the transhumanist, and Vulcan. And now we understand better what the real estate part of this was about. So this is the website for Vulcan. It says it was started in 1986 by Jody Allen and the late Paul Allen of Microsoft. And it's real estate developer for sustainable commercial and residential and retail projects in the Puget Sound area, and a diverse range of asset and project management support. And so they're working on brain science. They're working on ed tech. They're working on brain science, and they're going to build the real estate is the outside-in robot.
So the real estate then has all of the sensor networks and all those pieces.
It's your smart school. It's your it's your playground. It's your training ground. It's your therapist. It's your parole officer. It's your priest. The built environment is all of those things. And so, and we don't understand it that way. We're not prepared yet to understand what that means, what the implications are for living in a reflexive system that is designed to optimize us towards some programmed well-being dashboard.
I think the real estate also has to do with the conversion and the reimagining of the spaces for the new, you have to take those institutions, like the public systems, and those have to be repurposed too. So the real estate people, they seem to have a role in that, at least locally in Dallas.
Yeah.
And also charters. If you're going to privatize the system, then that real estate is involved in that.
Well, and we've talked a bit about, like when we were doing the Flow Life, about the setting up of mixed use communities, right? These purpose-built mixed use communities that incorporate education, options, right? And it likely isn't going to be a full-on brick and mortar school. It will more likely be some sort of a drop-in center. Right. I could imagine there being like a mini learning ecosystem, right? You've got a drop-in center. Maybe you've got one of the, what was it called? The urban farm. What was the farm in Dallas?
The Bonton.
Yeah, like a Bonton, right? And then you're going to have a museum, like a local museum, and you'll have some sort of, starter lab set up or a maker space or something. And that's what school will look like. It will look like all these different micro units, and then the kids will just bop around in there, and all of it will be smart in building their twin. So Allen and the brain. So he was, again, Microsoft. And Microsoft, I mean, can you say a little bit about Ballmer? Because that's, Steve Ballmer was part of the whole Microsoft crowd showing up in Dallas with Strive.
Yeah, so Ballmer is one of the investors in the Collective Impact through the Commit partnership. And so he came to town and spoke at one of their scorecard events where they go over all the big wins in their data dashboard and all the success of their impact model. And this collective impact model has captured the participation and they have all these alliances with different nonprofits, but the Commit partnership is the primary driver of this, and they're a nonprofit started by the Goldman Sachs guy, Todd Williams. And so Steve Ballmer, former Microsoft CEO, also investor in or owner of the Clippers. I believe he owns a sports team. And that's another recurring theme that you and I have seen with the whole sports teaming and games, sports and gambling and
And the NFTs, the participation in the teams and the
they're the
blockchain
big
stuff, right? And the leaderboards and,
Yes, and the crypto, well, in Bitcoin. So Dallas Mavericks and Dallas Cowboys. So we're seeing that too. But Ballmer he's invested in Blue Meridian and the Commit Partnership. So those.
And
are
I just
all
want to point out too on the Blue Meridian stuff. I did a whole recent post about water. Like this idea of water programming in relationship to R.F. Kennedy Jr.'s candidacy as a river keeper and the Navy and the Navy's involvement in the ed tech rollout and in the waveforms, this idea of waves and programming water. So I think that this idea of Blue Meridian as and the ocean protocols and stuff, I think that that's done with intention.
Because the body has meridians in water and the ocean, the meridians okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And so this is just a report from this Vulcan gathering in 2015 with Tom Vander Ark with Getting Smart. That was his thing. 25 impact opportunities in U.S. K-12 education. So this was, going on 8 years ago now, 7-8 years ago, really focusing on student-centered learning. And again, sounds great, especially after these rigid standardized test score rollouts. But again, it's the Hegelian dialectic, right? And it's what you always say, it's always backwards, right? Like you invert it. It's the AI learning the student.
Yep.
And these were some of their opportunities. So and look how much has happened in 8 years. So you've got micro schools, you've got next gen assessments, you've got social emotional learning, learning games, grants for coding, student-centered learning grants, tracking sub-skills, new school leadership, ed tech incubators, competency-based teacher prep, K-12 badging, learner profiles, and state competency-based credentialing systems. I mean, it's a lot to see what's happened in 8 years.
Yeah, and I struggle with this because I know people often ask me, since I am doing so much research, is, well, what do you do? And I mean, first people have to protect their own kids. So if they're not safe and we know that all of this is being rolled out in the public schools, but I also don't want to be part of the direction that they want us to go, which is out of school learning and creating these learning pods and things.
Well, like the micro schools, because that's the Acton Academy model, right? I mean, Acton was positioned. Don't tell me that the Texas energy interest didn't know exactly what micro schools were coming online. Like they knew.
Right. And we had, I told you of our friend in Dripping Springs who put their child in that Acton and then saw the, your
well, I'm trying not to be the devil. It's just this is what it is because it frames it as sort of free market, right? That whole micro school model is based as it's a franchise, right? And so parents are entrepreneurs with their kids.
Well, and it's so hard because and then you have the homeschooling. So, and I'm a huge proponent of it now. I didn't do it for my own kids. I didn't get it. Now I get it. But it can't be the homeschool that is putting them in the same system that they're or taking the dollars through the vouchers, because that is an access. They want to access all kids. And so we have to, it's very difficult to navigate this. And even with the private schools taking a lot of the, or they're adopting a lot of the same things that you're seeing in the public schools, there's nowhere to run or hide. And so, helping parents navigate that is a very difficult thing because, there's only one shot at the kids learning what they need to learn at the right ages. And, when it's developmentally appropriate and missing that window, you never catch up. So these are real struggles that parents have. And, we took for granted what, at least what we got, what you and I got.
Yeah.
We didn't realize how much that would be.
I know. Right. Me reading books in third grade in the cardboard geodesic dome in Miss Nebuse's class, right? We didn't know.
And
we didn't.
me drawing pictures for the art contest.
Right, yeah. I was under the dome and you were drawing the dome. Like there was like some quantum connection there. Yeah.
You were focused, I was daydreaming.
It takes all the stuff. Yeah. Well, and yeah, we're just winding this up. Again, I thought this was really interesting because I came across this also when I was trying to find the event. So this is an article from 2020, March of 2020. So again, weeks before the lockdowns, right? Weeks before the lockdowns, Humanity 2.0 launches new global wellness platform to implement scientific innovations in the faith sector. And what's interesting is this links back to the same Humanity 2.0 that Evan was at. This isn't a different one. This is embedded within that is global wellness platforms. And so listen to, and again, this is less than 2 weeks before the lockdowns happen. This is a PR newswire. Humanity 2.0, the pioneering Vatican affiliated foundation, has launched a new life science. Okay, so that's read biotech, right? The Internet of Bio-Nano things. And wellness implementation arm. Now that's weird language. A new life science and wellness implementation arm. Also sounds like an octopus. And Humanity 2.0 well-being. The platform, so they're announcing a platform, meaning like a program, will harness the momentum of one of the world's fastest growing industries, wellness. And that's what I've been saying all along in the health freedom movement. I'm like, the shock moment is the lockdown. The marathon is managed wellness.
It's so weird that I started out in the special ed elementary education department and then shifted my last year into
corporate wellness
space. Corporate wellness. It's so weird.
I know, it's crazy.
So weird that I'm
Who knew aerobics and Jane Fonda, where it was all going? So wellness estimated by the Global Wellness Institute to be a 4.5 trillion and growing twice as fast as the world economy, with the world's largest tangible platform, the Catholic Church. Look at that. Yeah. They're calling the Catholic Church the world's largest tangible platform. Like, this is kind of crazy. And then it says the combined integration is
the word means universal. This is important. Catholic means, if you look up the origin of the word, it means universal.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. The combined integration is the first purpose-built platform of its kind in the world and will have a profound impact on human health and well-being. So again, I'm starting to feel like if you're saying you said universal, or you?
I'm pretty sure. Unity? I looked up the definition of the
I'm
word.
just thinking like the whole protocol layer, this idea of a Web3 protocol layer, the smart contract layer. Like, this is kind of sounding like that's what it is, like a platform of wellness, like a smart contract, like linked into this effective altruism. Because, those people were in the room, right? And it says, let's see. The HWB partners with the world's leading scientific organizations to scale leading environmental and pregnancy well-being solutions. Again, they're after the mothers through the faith sector in order to catalyze global adoption. The Catholic Church is present in 196 countries, 1.4 billion people, manages 26% of the world's healthcare facilities and 150,000 schools. It is also the world's largest platform partner for the new Wellbeing Project. This is really important. That's why the bishops were in the legislature for the vouchers.
Yeah.
The 150,000 schools.
Income, universal. They keep calling it universal school choice. Yeah, the word Catholic is derived from the Greek adjective katholikos, meaning universal, and from the adverbial phrase katholou, meaning on the whole. The term was first used by Saint. It doesn't. I don't have the full thing here, but yeah, they
that's
keep
interesting.
About,
I hadn't.
We need to pass universal school choice. They keep putting the term universal, and I keep saying, yeah, like universal basic income, and we know that it will be on a wallet. We know that that's where they're headed. The precursor to the vouchers in Texas was something called Class Wallet. Has the hexagonal badge. It is not blockchain, but it's pretty darn close. And it's, I forget the name of the company that owns it, but it's a big one. And this will be universal school choice on a wallet. And
On the
but
wallet.
the one that the precursor one was $1,500 for special needs kids that came in through the pandemic. So these are not accidents. And
Yeah.
the Universal Catholic Church, it will be a huge piece of this, accessing the money and this new currency and this new
Yeah.
economy that's being set up.
Right. Well, and I just want to mention too on the wellness and the health systems and the life science that in the public schools, and I imagine eventually it will be in the parochial schools as well, the shift to this idea of the community school model and embedding the healthcare and mental health interventions into the schools. Right? Like they
Right.
want it all. Like they want the school to be the platform for all of these different interventions. And so then the second page, excerpt that I have from this press release, it said that the catalyst for the project is Pope Francis's 2015 Laudato Si encyclical. And then it goes right into this, the creation of this dicastery of integral human development in 2017, led by His Eminence Cardinal Peter Turkson. Now, Turkson was one of the leads at this event that Evan Baer was at just last fall, to redefine business models for global collaboration around sustainability and well-being. And oh, guess what? There's a huge rise in ESG investing. So, I mean, they go straight from Laudato Si to, oh, there's a big market in it, right? We have a large influx of investment capital. We'll usher in a new era of rapid growth and implementation in the global well-being space. That's like, we're using ESG money to build the outside-in robot, and we're telling you that it's for your own good.
Well, and I want to point out, just like we did when we were doing the breakdown of the Mormon event, is that this is not an attack on Catholics.
No.
And some of actually, when we went to the Capitol and these trips that we've been taking in this advocacy against these bad bills, against even the school vouchers, all of it have been these Catholic women, so these Catholic mothers. So,
but see, I don't think Catholic moms would go along with this if they understood the context.
Correct. And they know, and they also know that the church has been infiltrated and set up. And so they're very wise to these things.
Yeah.
However, they still practice the Catholic faith,
right,
but with wide open, with eyes wide open, and they know that this is an agenda.
Yeah.
So they reject all of this.
Yeah, I agree.
To get that
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's important because we're not here to undermine anybody's faith practice.
That's
right. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, faith is important. My preference is that people practice their faith in a way that isn't harmful to other people. And like from there on, like you do you, right? And hold on to what makes you authentic, because that's the beauty of the diversity of life on this planet, is that we have these divergent faith practices, but they're all being embedded into this. In this case, we're looking specifically at this event because you were in the same spaces as a participant at this event, and what was unfolding there has relevance to the advocacy work that you, among others, are doing at these legislative sessions. But I've done talks in the past about the LDS Church's involvement, about Tikkun Olam and the Jewish faith, Heal the World, and how that's going to be fed into this. I haven't done a lot about the Muslim practice. I think you've actually done a little bit more research into impact finance in the Sharia compliance space, but it is all embedded. So
it's all going to be folded in to this. And so no one is immune, not one faith. They're all showing signs of moving in that direction of unity. And that you can even see in biblical prophecy, is that will happen.
One world religion kind of thing. Yeah, eventually. And, I just want to emphasize the maternal health disparities. And I will say, in what we saw at the beginning of the lockdowns in the news media was a huge focus on health disparities, right? And that because of health disparities, there were worse impacts for Black and brown communities over and over again. Now, do we think that all of a sudden these people have changed their course of action? No, this was setting up an impact market in those communities. So you create the harm, and then you come in with the answer that's going to supposedly remedy the harm, but really create turn the people who've been harmed into commodities for these speculative investments. So I think like looking specifically at like Black women's like pregnancy stuff is really important because that's going to be coming online soon. And again, not to say that the problem doesn't exist, but if you create an impact market, it's very dangerous in my opinion.
Yes.
And so, yeah. So they're pivoting it, right? And I was just really surprised to realize that this whole description of the Catholic Church as a platform for wellness was so closely integrated into this Humanity 2.0, because this is my last slide. They kind of frame it like it's embedded at Harvard. So when I initially saw it, it looked like it was embedded at Harvard, but it seems like really it's the Vatican's project that's housed at Harvard in some ways. So this last slide is from the Harvard, the Humanity 2.0 website. And it is a quote, Thomas Aquinas' 2 precepts of charity from 1273. 3 things are necessary for the salvation of man. 1, to know what he ought to believe. 2, to know what he ought to desire. And 3, to know what he ought to do. And there's a bust of a woman with this pink circle behind her ear. And I don't know, is that Athena? Like, I guess we should figure out if that's Athena. But
or Medusa. I'm just kidding.
You know, it's kind of funny because to me, that quote, it goes back to the slight like weirdness with this guy, Dennis Humble, because his whole thing in the car was literally saying, most people don't want to have agency. Most people just want to be told what to do. Now, I disagree with that. But it's the echoing of you want to give over your agency to some other thing for human. He literally talks about human management as when I'm looking at this closing quote from Humanity 2.0 is essentially saying humanity should give up its agency in it to simply give over to things that you should believe, that you should want, that you should do. And again, I'm not saying rebel just to rebel or whatever, but I think that there is, like, within someone's faith, if you go through the motions because someone tells you it's the right thing to do, but it's not in your heart, I don't think it's the same.
It's not the
I think
same.
you have to give yourself into what, how your path, but you have to choose that. So to have a DAO or a Web3 or a smart contract grid tell you all these things, what you should believe and desire and do, it's not the same.
It's not authentic, and it's not. So what strikes me is that where it says the 3 things are necessary for the salvation of man, but are they talking about salvation from a faith perspective, or are they talking about salvation of man as a mortal being? Then would they be? I don't know. That's an interesting one. It doesn't sound like it's true faith.
No, it doesn't sound. It sounds like a program.
Yeah, and the God doesn't want God is not going to force you to love Him. You don't want your spouse to be forced, or they don't. True love, you don't want to force yourself on someone. You want it to be reciprocated because it's a natural response, not because you tell them that they must.
Yeah.
So it's scary. It's creepy.
I know, it's a little creepy.
Yeah.
So so I guess this is a good time to wrap up. I had good intentions of getting on to the military technology stuff and like hopping over to Fort Hood and everything, but maybe it's just best that we leave the Vatican stuff as it is and sit with it.
We'll just keep the Vatican. What happens in the Vatican
stays at the Vatican, right? But just to bring it back to OER, because I think maybe this might feel like we're spinning off. Like sometimes I have and a thing and a thing and a thing and a thing, and then all of a sudden I'm like 20 feet away from the thing I started at. But this idea that the Catholic Church is really interested, it says it clearly, in this it's the largest platform with these hundreds of thousands of schools to move into this space, right? And it's going to be an investment market. I mean, that's also very clear here. Like, we're so excited in that, and it's not just education, it's wellness. And and I think we need to understand wellness within the context of mental health and apps and performing for the machine, because the people having FTX there as one of the main sponsors, I think has everything to do with the effective altruism. And the effective altruism is this idea of getting data towards the singularity.
Yeah.
So as weird as it is to imagine that, like, rather than, and I know it's hard. There was somebody that, who's in the Diane Ravitch crowd who sort of wrote a piece. And again, it wasn't it was accurate to a certain point about Amplify and what was happening in Texas. It's not getting into this scope. Right. And at this point, we really need for people who are invested to step outside of the stories that they're being told. I'm about neighborhood schools. I'm about charter schools. I'm about homeschool. And actually, instead of fighting amongst each other or positioning like I'm in the right because we don't like Amplify because they're connected to this other person we don't like Lorena Jobs or something. We actually have to understand why it's happening. And the why it's happening, I believe, is to actually give up our humanity into the machine, or to ask families and communities to sacrifice their next generations into this machine. And I know it sounds a little bit over the top to say that, but I think that that's actually what's happening. And they make it very clear with the soul-bound tokens and these digital twins of that. And so we need to get to a point where we can start to call it out openly. And you and Mary are doing such a great job, and the people that you work with. And it's wild to me that we are in a position that we actually have to engage and say these things out loud. But I'm glad you're doing it. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's hard because that article and that type of writing is useful in terms of garnering some attention, but then I have to tie it to then the next. I have to explicitly say, yes, this is true, but you have to understand where it came from, and this doesn't address where it came from and why and where we're headed. It just talks about the problem, and it keeps us in that space. So yes, it's very important to understand that this is so much bigger than just a software company wanting to make money, and it's then you've got the left-right fight in the schools.
Right.
No,
it's the OER is literally about using data to both program children to be global citizens in this gig workforce, and it is to learn them to feed their digital profiles to train machine learning towards some consciousness, and then to coordinate children into this social computation. I mean, that's literally what it is. And yeah, there's money attached, there's power.
And that's why you have all the special interests all moving towards getting these bills passed. They have to get that door open. The legislation opens the door to scale this statewide as well as nationwide.
Yeah.
And it's
because Texas is an anchor. If they can get an anchor in Texas, if they can get and the voucher, I think probably at this point needs to be understood as a digital identity stand-in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same people pushing for that are pushing for the OER.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They are connected.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lynn.
You're amazing.
We'll have to come back and do the military talk the next time. But thank you so much, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.